Welcome everyone to our 19th annual Healthy Heart Day. Thank you for joining me this morning, whether you're watching on TV on Rogers Cable 20 or on the many streaming platforms on the internet. Thank you so much for joining us on our 19th event. This event is all about you. It's about empowering you, giving you the tools you need to stay heart healthy, whether it's changes to your diet, exercise, or stress management. It's about you and what you can do to regain your heart health. This event will have a number of exceptional speakers that I'll introduce you to later today. But as we go through this day, I think we need to recognize that we've gone through very stressful times. The last few years have been tough on all of us, but it's been particularly tough on the healthcare system. There have been a lot of delays, waiting times for tests, procedures, access to resources have been limited. As a result, our focus on the things we need to do to stay heart healthy has been lost. And that will have enormous impacts on our heart health unless we do something about it. We need to move forward. We need to move past this and redevelop strategies to lead healthier lives. And that's what this event is about today. It's about giving you the tools you need to stay heart healthy. You know, there have been a lot of detrimental things in the last few years, but interestingly, there have also been a few good things that have happened to our health habits. We've been eating more at home, cooking more, ordering out a lot less. All good things, because when you cook at home, you have control over what you do, what you make, what you put in the food, and that's all good ways that you can control your heart health. Unfortunately, we have been snacking more during this time, it turns out, and exercising a whole lot less than we did previously, all of which has led to a significant amount of weight gain. The pandemic 10 has now become the pandemic 20. On average, Canadians have gained between 10 to 20 pounds of weight in the last few years. And that type of weight gain will have enormous impacts on our heart health. Weight gain causes diabetes to progress, raises cholesterol, raises blood pressure, all of which puts a huge strain on our cardiovascular system and accelerates atherosclerosis and heart blockages. We need to change that. We need to do what we can to regain our heart health. And while we've gained weight, we've also become a lot more sedentary. Partly out of necessity, we have been instructed at times to stay at home. But that has changed our habits. We're staying at home far too much now, watching way too much TV or streaming way too much on the internet. We need to get back out there, start doing things that can regain our heart health. And that's what we will be talking about today. As Martin Luther King Jr. once said, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. And that's what this event is about today, moving forward. Developing strategies that we can implement on our daily lives to regain our heart health. And we'll be guided on that journey by three exceptional speakers today. Dr. Peter Lynn, that has spoken with us on many other Healthy Heart Days, will be speaking again on about things that we can do with our diet, exercise, and stress management. We're fortunate that Dr. Michael Vallis from Dalhousie University in Halifax has agreed to join us, and we'll be talking about ways that we can make behavioral change. Once you get set in your ways, you can get into a rut. And he will teach us ways that we can change our behavior, come up with new strategies that we can sustain over the long term. And we're very fortunate and honored to have Dr. Kim Connolly join us. He's the Chief of Cardiology at St. Michael's Hospital at the University of Toronto. And he will be guiding us on the breakthroughs that have happened in the last few years in cardiovascular disease management and prevention, and giving us hope that we have not lost this fight, that we can regain some of the lost ground, and we can do better. And I'm excited to hear Kim's presentation later this morning. So, we will be doing a lot this morning, but it is about empowering you to do what you can do. And we have an exceptional wellness coach who will be working with us, teaching us exercises that we can do at home and exercising with us this morning. And I'm really looking forward to seeing Cindy Catton's presentation and exercising with us as we go through this morning. Thank you so much, Cindy, for joining us. But remember, this event is about you. It's about you making changes. And change to be implemented requires goals. We want you to create SMART goals. So what are they? SMART goals are specific. You have to say that you're going to make a specific change, not just that I'm going to eat better. That's not really implementable. You have to choose something that you think you can do. Perhaps over the last few years you've been just eating a lot more chips because you've been staying at home. And maybe you can just say, okay, I'm only going to buy chips for a special occasion. If you don't have it at home, you just can't eat it. That's a specific goal. It should be measurable. Don't just say, I'm going to get more fit. It should be measurable. Say, by 3 months, I'm going to be walking half an hour each day. That's a measurable goal. It should be achievable. If you don't think you can run a marathon in a year, then don't set that as your goal. It'll only set you up for failure and make you unhappy. It should be realistic. It should also be timely. It should be time-bound. If you say you're going to get to walk half an hour each day, set a time limit at which you'll achieve that. 3 months, 6 months, whatever you think it'll require to accomplish that goal. It should be time-bound. And these SMART goals will allow you to make the changes that we'll be discussing today to regain the heart health. And I am so excited to get going on this morning. Moving forward. Ready, set, go.
They say what you don't know won't hurt you. Well, it almost killed me.
They discharged me from the hospital. 2.5 hours later, I'd had my stroke while I was pregnant.
No one saw my heart attack coming until I flatlined.
I was sent home with the wrong diagnosis. Enough is enough.
Jan Liggett joined Cambridge City Council to represent Ward 4 in 2014 and was elected mayor of the city in 2022. She is a local businesswoman and philanthropist. She founded the Fallen Sparrows Fund for critically ill children. She volunteers extensively in the areas of art, culture, and heritage. Thank you, Mayor Liggett, for bringing greetings on behalf of the city and council members.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mayor Jan Liggett. On behalf of the City of Cambridge, your City Council and myself, welcome once again to Cambridge Cardiac Care's Healthy Heart Day. This wonderful free event is in its 19th year and continues to be an invaluable educational celebrational opportunity for patients and professionals alike. This year's theme, Moving Forward, Ready, Set, Go, is so meaningful to me. In my new position as mayor, I've been working hard to balance my many professional obligations while still trying to make both my physical and mental health a priority. Whether as professionals, employees, or entrepreneurs, I'm sure at one time or another, we have been praised for how hard we work, how much time we put into working, and our focus on our jobs. While working hard is commendable, it's time we start supporting each other's goals and accomplishments outside of the workplace and taking an interest in those aspects of our lives that enhance our health and happiness. I'm looking forward to hearing what Dr. Lynn has to say about improving behaviors that lead to bad eating, drinking, and exercise habits, not to mention learning a little bit about stress management being the key word. Equal important will be Dr. Vallis and his ideas on harnessing the motivation to improve those behaviors and prioritize our health, something we all struggle with from time to time. The City of Cambridge Recreation Department can help with motivation by providing many opportunities to be active at any age. We have programs for babies, children, adults, and seniors of all ability levels. Please do check out our recreation guide and get involved. This year is special because we are celebrating Cambridge's 50th anniversary, so watch out for extra fun and celebration at these events. As we move into spring, it is a great time to explore the city's parks, trails, and conservation areas, whether as a family or take some quiet time on your own. Being out in nature is good for both the mind and the body. Outdoor activity is often free of charge and available any time of day or day of the week. Our local heart specialists continue to work tirelessly to intervene, educate, and assist their patients to set attainable goals and provide the supports needed along the way. Happy Healthy Heart Day. I'm sure you're all excited to get started. Ready, set, go.
Thank you, Mayor Liggett and City Councillors, for your continued support of this event. So, let's get started.
We can be hurt. We can be bruised. We can be broken. Slowed down, confused, and even numbed. But we can't be stopped. And we can't be defeated. Because we've got more fight in us, more breakthroughs in us, and more people who care about people in us. The unknown, it's scary, but so is our will. Our will to research, our will to educate, and our will to save lives. See, we're built on a foundation that's strong. Our mission, unwavering, and together we'll beat as one.
It is both an honor and pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Peter Lynn, a friend and colleague and a recurrent presenter at Healthy Heart Day. He is the director of the Primary Care Initiative at the Canadian Heart Research Centre, a health correspondent for CBC Radio, and he has received numerous awards and accolades for his educational efforts. Dr. Lynn will discuss with us practical strategies to improve our diet, our fitness level, and our mental health, all in an effort to kickstart our journey for better heart health. Peter.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pandey, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to your organization again, and thank you for all your work that you do to put on these programs every single year to make sure that everybody gets a little bit of education in terms of our health and how to look after ourselves. So this year, I was asked to talk about kickstarting your health. So this is me sitting as a potato couch. I think many of us have done that during the pandemic, and so therefore, I think it's time that we start getting ourselves back into shape. So I thought I'd start off with this little funny. They said, is it nature or nurture? Are you born this way or is it your lifestyle? And the punchline here is that either way, it's still your parents' fault. In other words, how you were raised or how you were, genetically made, it's still your parents that were doing it. But I think this time around, I think with the pandemic, this is pre-COVID, and then post-COVID, we sort of started to see this. We talked about the COVID weight and everything else. So definitely our genetics hasn't changed. In other words, we haven't had different parents or different genetic makeup, and yet we've all gained weight. And so therefore, it is our lifestyle that is so important. And therefore, we're going to spend some time talking about what we can do to get things back on track. And usually we're talking about good behaviors and bad behaviors. And it's not so much that you're doing horrible things, you're just ending up doing more of the things that may not be so good for you. So for example, you're eating more. So eating in itself is not bad. It's when you're eating more that becomes a problem. You're not moving around. So taking a rest is good, but when we're sitting in front of the TV, 24/7, that becomes a problem. And then drinking alcohol, for example, might be a problem because people were increasing the amount that they were drinking. And then finally, of course, there was increased smoking. Now, unfortunately, smoking, there is no safe amount, so therefore any amount is bad. But certainly many people were saying that they were smoking more during the pandemic, maybe to calm their nerves, maybe because there wasn't much else to do. So let's just take a crack at how we can, fix some of these balances and get it back into balance. So let's talk about food first. So if I showed you this plate of food, you would say, you're being a miser, you're not giving me a whole lot of food. But if I show you the same amount of food, but on a smaller plate, the one on the far right looks really quite a healthy serving. And you would say, oh my gosh, you've given me too much. So perhaps we can reframe things by making the plates a little smaller, the glasses a little taller and skinnier. So that way it looks like you have more volume, for example, when you're drinking. And if you look at the plates, if you look back to, 1960s, our plate was only 8.5 inches. And that would hold about, 800 calories or so. potato. But now we're up to 12-inch plates, and you could see that it has more area, put more food. And so therefore you could put 1900 calories onto that plate. And so when it looks like a little bit of food, you're going to end up putting more food, and therefore we're going to accidentally eat more food. So perhaps making the plates a little bit smaller, making the glasses a little taller so it looks like more things in it, maybe putting ice cubes into your drinks as well to make it, again, mainly water as opposed to whatever you're drinking might be helpful. In terms of proportions, the Diabetes Canada have a very nice hands proportion. So based on your hand size, you could figure out what you need to eat. And if I'm a larger person, I'm going to have bigger hands. So therefore, it actually automatically scales up for you. So for example, 1 fist is what you should be looking at when you're talking about your starches and your grains and your fruits. So 1 fistful per meal is what you're looking at. So if you have a whole pile of potato and it's 1 fist size, then you've used up your starch kind of area. So we don't want to see 2 fists, and we don't want to see, rice and potatoes and all of these things together. So that gives you a sense of how much of the carbohydrates or starches we should be having. In terms of vegetables, it's 2 handfuls. So whatever you could put into 2 hands would be good. But be careful about the dressing. It's the dressing that carries the calories, not so much the vegetables themselves. And then in terms of meat products or meat alternatives, it's the palm of your hand. So if you're talking about red meat, it's the palm of your hand and roughly about the thickness of your little finger. And then if you're talking about fish or chicken, you can get a little bit bigger in the hand in terms of that. So therefore you look at your hands as proportion size. And then in terms of fat, just that little thumb bit is how much fat you should be having in there. So butter, those kinds of things might be a good way to get the size down. And then of course there's milk alternatives, milk and milk alternatives. You should have that with your meals as a drink. So therefore this is a good way to kind of guesstimate how much food you should be eating. And you always have your hands with you, so therefore you can always use them as a measuring cup. But we also still have a lot of information about, don't do this, don't do this. This is bad for you. Carbs are bad for you. Fats are bad for you. Sugar is bad for you. So it isn't that they're bad. It's just when we have too much of it, that's when it becomes problematic. So I like this one, fat leads to the dark side. So that was during the 70s. When they looked at the arteries in people, there was cholesterol buildup. And so therefore they said it must be fat and cholesterol. And so therefore there were articles written that, cholesterol is bad for you. And then now we have articles that you should probably be eating butter, like why are we doing this kind of back and forth? And it's because we're learning more. So what you eat doesn't all show up clogging up your arteries. So for example, if I eat a lot, but then I'm doing a lot of exercise, I'll end up burning it all off. So some of these professional athletes eat a huge amount of stuff, but they're burning it off, right? Whereas if I don't eat too much, but I'm just sitting there doing nothing, then maybe more of that stuff will end up clogging up things in there. And then the whole story about butter and sort of the oil, olive oil, like what's the difference between these things? Well, it turns out it's the chemistry, right? So butter kind of looks like this. So this is sort of a saturated fat. And this saturated fat, all it means is that every single carbon that's sitting here has a friend, has a hydrogen attached to it. And so therefore this is very symmetrical and it's straight. And so you can imagine one stick of this plus another, they could stack together very nicely. And because they can stack together, they become solid at room temperature. And so therefore butter is solid at room temperature because this thing can stack together like this. On the other hand, in oil, basically it's an unsaturated fat. And all that means is that somewhere the carbon doesn't have the friend hydrogen there. So in other words, the 2 carbons are holding hands, double hands. And so therefore you're missing hydrogens here. And so because of this, it's now a little bit bent. So therefore it's not straight across. So now this one doesn't stack very well, and therefore it is not solid at room temperature. It's a liquid. And that's why we call it an oil, basically. And so that's the major difference between saturated and unsaturated. Unsaturated has a little double bond here. Now the double bond, the hydrogen can be either on the same side, okay, and that's known as cis fat, okay? So it's on the same side. It's some sort of Latin word that means same side. Or it could be on opposite sides. So that you can see the hydrogen is here, and there's your double bonds. And so this would be known as trans. So they're across from each other. So this is known as trans fat. So why is that important? You've heard about trans fats in our food and how they're trying to limit trans fat. Now, why is that? If you look at the double bond here and you see the hydrogen on the same side, and so what happens at these 2 hydrogens, they don't like each other. They push against each other. And that's why you bend this big molecule. So it's bent, and that's why it's a liquid form. It can't stack together. On the other hand, if you have a trans fat, which is the hydrogen are opposite to each other, they're not pushing on each other. And so therefore this thing is very straight. Now, if it's straight, it means it could stack together, and therefore it could be solid at room temperature. And this was very useful because if you're trying to make a cookie, you need something that can hold together. And so therefore we started to use trans fats in our cooking and baking and things like that. But we now discovered that trans fat is something that we sort of created. And so therefore nature has a hard time breaking it down. And so therefore maybe we shouldn't be eating more of the trans fat. If we are going to eat something that is solid at room temperature, then maybe we should be eating the butter, which your body knows how to break down. And so this is sort of the rationale of how come people are saying, you should eat more of this and more of that. It's more like switching the types of things that are less offensive to our body. And certainly we don't want to eat huge amounts of this. So no matter which one you eat, if they stack together at room temperature, they might stack together and fill up your arteries as well. So therefore we do want to limit the amount of these saturated fats and things like that in our diet. Then we went on to the sugar is poison, so everybody said too much sugar is bad for you. And it is true, your body likes sugar. So in other words, whenever we taste sweetness, we know that there's energy because our body burns glucose, which is a sugar. So therefore our body burns glucose. So therefore we're always looking for that. So that's why we tend to go after ripe fruits. Whenever you see like a ripe fruit that's red, you know that there's more sugar in there. And therefore you're going to have more energy. Because remember, as cave people, we didn't have all this food around us. So we had to go find food. And so if you found a ripe fruit that has more sugar in it, you're going to have more energy and then you will survive. So that's why animals also look for the ripe fruit, the red fruits. So if you have an apple tree, it'll be the ripe ones that the animals will go after and pick off for you. And so that's why, our body requires sugar. So it's not that sugar is bad, but too much of it may be a problem. And the other thing is that we were trying to make things sweet because we know that your brain likes the sweetness because it thinks it's going to get more energy. And so therefore high fructose corn syrup is something that we use to sweeten our foods. And the problem with fructose is that it's a little different than glucose. So the shape of it is different. And fructose is mainly processed in your liver in our body, whereas glucose, any part of your body can use it. Your muscles can use it and things like that. So therefore, if we take in a lot of fructose corn syrup, then we need your liver to process it off. And these are extra calories that we're going to be adding in there as well. And remember, anything that's sweet, your brain is going to think that's a good source of energy. So I'm going to keep eating it. So that's why there's a bit of addiction, I guess, if you will. But it's the way our body was built because we need to find food sources to keep ourselves alive. Because in the olden days, food was not that plentiful. And so therefore you had to go looking for it. And when you found a sugary source, then that's something that could give you a lot of energy. And that's why you would go back and eat more of it. Now, I like this one. You remember this commercial? It's like, where's the beef? So what about protein, right? So we've got carbohydrates. We've got all these different things that we're talking about. What about protein? And so this protein is very interesting. You heard about amino acids. So what are amino acids? So they have this same end. So this end is the same. This is the amine group. So therefore it's the same. But you can see that the tails are different. So some of them are longer, some of them are shorter, some of them are this shape. And so these are the different amino acids that build up all your body parts, your muscle, your skin, your hair. Those are all made of amino acids or proteins. And proteins are just a bunch of amino acids hooked together. And so you can see these chains are quite different. So why do we need them to be different? Well, it's kind of like making a necklace. So if I were to string up all these little different amino acids together, their tails are quite different. So the front part is the same. So I hook them all up and then the tails are different. Now you can imagine that if I have a fat tail, that's going to push against the other guy. And then if I have a skinny tail, maybe that's more space, right? So you can imagine that depending on the tail, I'm going to either push things apart or pull things together again. And remember, they also have a bit of electrical charge. So they're going to attract or repel. And so the purpose of all of this is that we want this thing to fold into a particular shape. So if you make that little bead, of all these amino acids, and then you were to let it go, then basically it'll fold up into some nice shape like this. And this now becomes a useful protein, like let's say your skin muscle or whatever, or perhaps it becomes an enzyme that helps you digest and things like that. So in other words, the proteins are our workhorses, and the strings that we make when they fold up, those things can become like scissors and those kinds of things, different things that our body might need inside. And so therefore we can fold them up into beautiful origami like this. I'm no good at this kind of stuff. However, you need a certain amount of these things. So there are ones that are essential amino acids. In other words, these ones you have to eat in. You cannot make them. And then there's other ones that we can create or we can pick up from elsewhere. So let's say I'm missing one. Let's say I'm missing this one and I'm missing this one. Let's say just out of the two. So I'm missing those essential ones. Now, let's say I'm trying to make a protein and I need those two guys. What am I going to do? So let's say in these positions is where I need the first guy, and in these positions is where I need the other guy. So if I don't have that particular bead, I'm just going to substitute another bead in there. Now that's a problem because now it's not the right shape and all that kind of stuff. And so therefore it's not going to be pushing and folding in the right way. And so therefore the fold might be weird. And so if the fold is weird, then that protein won't be able to work as well. And so therefore, if the protein doesn't work as well, then that job of that protein is not being done. So whatever it was doing is not getting done, and that would lead to diseases and things like that. So for example, let's say there's stuff that's building up in the head that you're supposed to clear out, and the enzyme that's supposed to clear that out isn't working, then you would have buildup of garbage in your head, for example. And so therefore, instead of a beautiful fold like this, it might look kind of crumpled up. And so that's why it's so important for us to eat all the right ingredients so that your body can make all the beads and all the necklaces and all these proteins that you need. So that's why we get a little nervous about the tea and toaster. So as you get older, you tend not to want to fuss with cooking. The teeth isn't very good, so you don't want to really chew meat a lot. And so there's a lot of people that just have a bit of tea and some toast. So they feel good. And toast has no protein in it. So it has no amino acids, those beads that we're talking about. And so therefore, they're just taking in calories, so they have energy, but they don't really have any building blocks. And so therefore, if they can't build the proteins, then the skin becomes thin, the muscles become weak, and those processes, those enzymes may not be doing their job. So that's why we need to make sure that we have the protein intake for across the full spectrum, from baby all the way up to the elderly, to make sure that they stay in good shape. Now, protein, as I said, sort of makes muscles, and it makes all the parts that you need, muscles, skin, enzymes, everything. The carbohydrates that you take in, like the sugars, for example, gives you energy. Okay, so your starches, your pastas, your breads, and sugar is basically giving you energy. And anything that's left over is going to be converted into fat, and it gets stored into fat stores. So this is the balancing system that we have. And in nature, we weren't having tons of food, so therefore it was a good balance. Now I can go out and I can eat tons of protein. I can have a huge steak. I can have tons of pasta. I can have tons of pizza, for example. So all of a sudden I can increase the amount that I'm taking in to a huge amount. So I don't need all that huge amount. So all of it will be converted as extra into fat. And the reason is because our body was built in a time of scarcity when there wasn't a whole lot of food. So therefore, every little bit left over that you don't use gets converted into fat, so that in the future, when you can't find food, we can then burn the fat to keep you alive. So our body was designed during a time like that. And now we have plenty of food that we can take in. And so your body still does the same thing. So anything extra, it's going to get converted into fat. And so that's why when we ate more and more during the COVID time, we were converting whatever we weren't using, because we're just sitting there watching TV. And so we weren't using a whole lot of energy. So all of that extra was then converted into fat and stored, thinking that you'll need to use it on a rainy day in the future. But so far we haven't had to use it yet. And then so we have a lot of diets, right? So there's a cabbage soup diet where all you drink is cabbage soup, for example. And all they're trying to do is get you to control the amount that you're eating. So instead of having, 3 steaks a day and having, 4 pieces of pie a day, they just said, eat this. And then by doing that, we can take whatever your diet is, and then we just control how many calories that you take in. And then if you have a catchy title, cabbage soup diet, then people are more likely to have that. So there's many of these types of diets around. This is the 5-bite diet. And so you just take 5 bites of any of your food. It sounds awfully wasteful, but definitely you'll look like these chubby cheeks. So would that work? Well, yeah, if I'm eating huge amounts of food and then now you tell me to just take 5 bites, then basically I will eat less and therefore I will lose weight in that fashion. The raw food diet, because we realize that when we cook the food, we can actually absorb more of the nutrients. It breaks down things so that we can actually pick up the nutrients easier. So therefore eating the raw stuff will make it harder for you to actually, get the nutrients out. So we just make it more difficult for you. And that's why when you look at the bread that's really finely, white bread, for example, that's been milled and it's easy, you can get the sugar out of there very quickly. But then if you look at rye bread that has seeds on it and things like that, you can imagine that your body would have to work very hard before you can get the calories out of that system. So making it difficult for you to get the calories is another way, but also eating less of it would be way. Keto is where you basically say, I'm not going to eat any carbohydrates, so none of the quick energy. I'm going to eat protein and I'm going to convert the protein into energy, or I'm going to burn the fat in my body already. And so therefore I'm going to use my fat stores and I'm going to convert protein into sugar if I need to. But when we take away quick sugar, like the quick energy, a lot of people have brain fog. Like they kind of go like, I feel tired because I couldn't make the energy that you were normally used to. So think of carbohydrates as quick energy that you can spend quickly, whereas converting fat or converting protein takes a bit of time. So in the beginning, people kind of go, I just feel tired. I don't feel so good because they don't have enough of that quick energy going. So it's a good idea, but maybe proportion control and things like that may also be useful as well. Bernstein diets and things like that, where they have meal replacements. In other words, we give you this thing to replace that because you're only taking 800 calories. So these severely low calories, and then we replace you with certain foods. But then once you eat real food, then you don't know how much to eat because you're used to those replacements. So it's difficult to come off these replacements. And then you have Atkins diets and things like that. So there's lots of different strategy, but the whole idea is to take whatever your eating pattern is now, how much you're eating, and then we control it. And then by controlling it and reducing it, we will be able to help you lose weight in that way. The zone diet is just talking about proportions, like 40% carbs, 30% protein, 30% fat. So it's sort of balancing you out. Again, taking somebody that, let's say, only eats, pasta and pizza and all that kind of stuff, and then balancing them out would be helpful and healthy for them. The paleo diet that you've seen, Flintstones here. So in other words, these would be things that are not on the paleo diet. So if you were a caveman, what would you eat? We wouldn't eat all this processed stuff. So these are all processed things. And whenever we process things, we kind of take out the fiber and the roughage. We make it nice and smooth because our mouth likes smooth stuff. So we take out fiber and roughage, make it really smooth. And then generally speaking, we either add fat into it because fat tastes good. And also our brain knows that fat carries more calories, right? So if I eat a bit of fat, I'm going to bring in more energy. Therefore, I'm going to stay alive. Sugary, because sugar, if I find sugar, I burn sugar in my body. And so therefore I can bring in more energy as well. Interestingly, salty is also attractive because it's very hard to find salt in nature. And our body needs salt to hold on to water. So in our body, we have salt, which then holds on to fluids, and then we can pump the stuff around. Like that's part of the liquid that we have in our body. And so therefore, if you find a salt source in nature, that's a good thing. So that's why if you can eat something salty, people kind of figure I'm going to be able to survive. So again, that's your primitive brain saying that if you find a salt source, that's helpful for you. If you find a sugar source, that's going to keep you alive. And if you find a fat source, that's a lot of calories that come in. So that's why people tend to gravitate towards salty, sweet, and fatty kind of foods. And so therefore, the food industry knows that they want to satisfy us. So they give us a lot of those things as well. Where if you look at the paleo diet, it basically says, what would a caveman eat? So a caveman would eat kind of things that you would see growing. So as opposed to processed foods, it would be sort of whole foods and whole fruits and things like that, so that you're eating what is in nature as opposed to something that's been processed and made to feel really smooth texture and things like that. The Mediterranean diet is probably the most popular one in terms of health. So you could see here, the red meats and the sweets is sparingly. So at the top is not too much. And then you can see eggs, poultry, 1 to 2 times per week. And then fish, seafood, and omega-3 kind of rich foods three times or more a week. And then you have the whole grains, legumes, vegetables. You can do that every day. And then they want you to make sure that you have physical activity and that you have, family time, meaning that you're not constantly just on the go. So in other words, time to take it easy. In other words, getting rid of stress. So if you want to look at the Mediterranean diet, that's not a bad strategy for people to look at because it's quite balanced and it sort of tells you which one you should eat. If you're looking up nutritional facts, just make sure you know what the proportions are, right? So this is, Girl Guide cookies, and you can look up the side of it and you can see all the percentages and everything else of your daily need. But then remember, it's not for the whole box, okay? So I can't eat just 2 cookies, so I tend to eat 6 cookies. So that's actually 520 calories and it's 20 grams of fat, which is quite a lot for just, 8 cookies. So remember, when you look at the label, just look at how much it is. And as you can see up here, it says 2 cookies serving. That's what these numbers are referring to. So if you eat 10 cookies, you have to multiply that by 5 and so on and so forth. So if you want to use the labels, you can do it that way. I think this is a very good way to do it. So if you look at your plate, just half of it should be vegetables here. You can see here, vegetables and legumes and things like that. And then you have about a quarter of it here where it's going to be your proteins. So that could be meat, fish, chicken, that could be tofu if you're vegetarian, beans if you're vegetarian, that kind of thing. And then over here, 1/4 is your grains and your starches and things like that. And then they've got this thing over here, water. Okay, notice they marked it as water as the preferred choice because you do need water in your body, and we're all dehydrated a little bit, so more water is good. But also with water, you're not bringing in any calories. There's no sugar in it and things like that. So that's why water is good. If you like sort of some taste to it, you can put lemon, lime. You could, put a little bit of taste if you don't like bland water. But definitely that would be sort of a nice way to balancing. So half the plate is vegetables, and then the other half, you split it in half, is going to be protein, and then your starches down at the bottom. And this just gives you a snapshot of what some of those things might look like. What about these, big yo-yo kind of diets where you go on the, like this days, it was the Biggest Loser, where they went on to severe calorie restricted 800 calorie kind of diets. What happened to those people? So this was a study saying from the show, 6 years later, what happened to these people that lost so much weight? And we're talking about huge, right? This one person lost like 155. Like that's a huge amount. That's a whole person in terms of weight. So what happened to these people? And at first we thought, well, they figured it out, so therefore they're going to be good. So this researchers went back and looked up those people and then checked what happened to them. And so they looked at their metabolism, so how fast are they burning calories, right? Normally I'm just sitting here. I need to burn, let's say 1,000 or 1,200 calories just to stay alive. And what they noticed with these people is during the show, when they were doing these severe caloric restrictions, like 800 calorie diets, they noticed their metabolism comes down. And it continues to come down. You can see some of these people are burning very few calories. In other words, the body became efficient. So if you're going to give me less food, I'm going to become really efficient so that I don't, die. And your body is basically saying, I need to become efficient. So when you go on those crash diets, your body actually becomes really efficient. It's almost like a hybrid. You become a hybrid. Now, what would happen in the following is that if I feed you again, what happens? And what you can see here is that during the show, there's no calories coming in or very little, so therefore you're losing weight. But when we feed you, your weight can now go shooting up. And the reason is very simple, because you became very efficient. So let's say before you needed 1,000 calories to stay alive, but now you've done this severe restriction, and now you only need 500 calories to stay alive. If I feed you 1,000, you have 500 left to put into the bank. And so that's why these people gain back all of their weight and then some, because they become efficient. So I don't need those extra calories, and the extra calories went into extra weight as well. So that's why people do these yo-yo diets. They go down, and then when they come back up, they gain all the weight back, and then they gain an extra. And that's because their body has become very efficient and they don't need to use those extra calories. They can actually store it again. And remember, your body is thinking there was a famine and I could have died. And so that's why I became efficient, and I need to store everything just in case that famine happens again. And so that's why that is not a healthy way in terms of losing weight. And so therefore, we need to go and think about how else can we do it. Stress has now become a big issue for us. So when we go on these crash diets, it's a stress for your body. But the stress that I'm talking about is mental stress, right? And the problem with stress is that your body was designed so that if you're under stress, what are you going to do? Well, basically your heart rate should go up, right? Because you're being chased, as an animal. So in nature, if you are stressed out, it means that somebody's trying to eat you, or you're trying to chase something to eat them. But anyway, nonetheless, there's some exercise that's involved. So therefore, your heart rate would go up, your blood pressure would go up, your sugar goes up so that your muscles have energy to burn, because I know that you're going to need to run. So our body is designed that when you feel stress, your body is ready to fight or flight, running. And so therefore, I'm going to do all those things to support you. So I'm going to increase your heart rate, increase your blood pressure, increase your sugar. However, you and I are not under that kind of stress anymore. It's mortgage payments. It's trying to get the kids to the school, and it's work stress. So that stress is very different than the I need to run after food, or I'm being chased as food. Because in the I'm being chased as food, everything is done in a couple of seconds, right? Like about a minute and a half. Either I made it, I'm alive still, in which case the whole system can shut down again, or I've been eaten. Okay, so in nature, this stress doesn't last for very long. And so therefore, the system doesn't turn on for very long. Now imagine the stress of mortgage payments. That's not short stress, right? That's all the time there. The stress of, like the kids getting into trouble, or my job, I might get fired, or COVID is going to get me. So that stress is long. So it's not quick. So therefore, if I have long stress, then my body is still going to increase the heart rate, blood pressure, and sugar, because it thinks that you still need to run.
And so therefore that system is no longer working in our society anymore. That system was beautiful in nature when you have to run away or run after food. But in this case, that system is not serving us that well, because instead of turning on and off, it's turning on and staying on. And so therefore, if your blood pressure is high for a long period of time, then it's going to cause damage to your heart and everything else. If your sugar is high and your muscles are not burning it, then all it is high sugar in your blood, and sugar sticks to places. So therefore it's going to stick in your eyes and your heart and your kidneys. And that's how we have diabetes complications as well. So if your heart is going fast a lot and it's pumping under a lot of pressure, like blood pressure is high, yes, has to pump a lot, then that's going to be harder on your heart muscles and therefore more likely to have heart attacks and things like that. If the blood pressure is high and damaging the pipes, then you're more likely to have strokes, and you're more likely to damage the pipes in your legs, damage your kidneys. And so all of a sudden, stress now is causing that reflex of get out of danger to be on all the time, and therefore causing damage within our body. So that's why stress management is so important. Now, it's interesting, when you're in war, what do you think your body will do? It'll say stockpile. So when you're in war, so let's say I told you we're going to war right now, you're going to hoard things, right? You're going to start holding things, right? You want to hold on to gasoline, you want to hold on to stuff. So if your body thinks that you're at war, then it says you need fuel. So therefore, let's load up on fuel. And so therefore, it's going to go looking for those things, right? Salty things, sugary things, and fatty things. So that's why when you're under a lot of stress, your body tends to gravitate towards all the wrong foods. And so therefore, people called it comfort food. I'm going, how could it be comfortable if it's a greasy meal? It's because your body isn't looking for comfort food. Your body is looking for food to go to war. And so therefore, I need high calories, which is fat. I need sugar, which is what I burn all the time. And then I need salt, because if I get cut in war, I need the salt to hang on to water for me. So in other words, sodium hangs on to water, which means I can have some fluid to pump around. And so that's why your body will look for salty, sweet stuff, and also fatty things to eat. Other kinds of stress that we have to think about is actually the normal stress of you and I yelling at each other. Okay, so in other words, social interactions that may be stressful, work-related stressful, financial stresses. So any of those stresses will then trigger your body into thinking that it's in battle station. Less sleep is also a trigger for that fight or flight system, because if you can't sleep, your body thinks you must be in terrible danger. That's why you're staying awake. And if you're in terrible danger, it means that we need to be at war and be ready. Therefore, we're going to stockpile. Therefore, we're going to do all of these things as well. And so therefore, lack of sleep actually triggers, I'm in danger. And so therefore, I need to go into war mode as well. And then finally, skipping meals is horrible, right? You don't have time to eat, or let's say you say, well, you told me I'm fat, so I stopped eating. So now your body goes into famine. So then your body thinks there's a famine out there. There's no food. So now the next meal that you eat, the body's going to say, just grab everything. We're at war and there's no food. And so therefore, grab whatever you can and stockpile everything. And if you want to do exercise, your body will say, why are you expending energy? I want you to lie down. And so that's why people say, I feel so exhausted all the time. I don't have energy to go and exercise. And so you can imagine that this would be a nasty scenario. So stress, lack of sleep, skipping meals, all of these things could then trigger that fight or flight, going to war, and therefore your body starts to retain all of this food as best as it can. And so therefore we need to reverse those things, right? We need to decrease stress, we need to increase your sleep, and we need to not skip meals. So the way to lose weight is not to starve yourself, because as soon as you hit that starvation mode, then your body thinks that there is a famine going on out there. So let's do some yoga. Well, not necessarily yoga, but let's calm things down, okay? And if we can calm things down, then we take your body out of emergency mode and we put it back into the normal mode. Remember, the body was never designed to be in emergency mode all the time. It was designed to be in emergency mode and then come out of it. So let's try and make our stress not trigger all of these horrible things inside our body. Oh, I like this one. This is a German beer. When I was there, I wanted one of these big steins to take a picture with it. And then he took one look at me, and instead of the big stein that he brought me this little tiny stein. And he was right. I was drunk within 4 seconds of it. But the concept of alcohol, because when people get stressed out and then you tell them get relaxed, then they go towards alcohol or drugs or something like that. So I think many people have that kind of concept in there. Now that's a problem, because what's one drink? Okay, so this is one drink, and I love this picture. So what is a drink, and how many many should we have? Like what's normal and what's abnormal? So here's what a standard drink is. So there's a beer, there's a cooler, there's a wine, 5 ounces, and then spirits here, you could see 1.5 ounces. So in other words, it's not a huge glass like this in terms of standard drinks that we're looking at. And in terms of Canada, we just came out with new guidelines, and they looked at people in terms of how much you drink, what is the risk of health problems. And that's how they did it, not in terms of are you addicted, not addicted, that kind of thing, although that's a big concern that we have for people that are drinking. But it was more about what is your risk of getting health conditions if you drink this much. So if you want no risk, okay, it's pretty obvious, then 0. So for example, if you're pregnant, we want you to be at 0 because there's a huge risk for you and also the baby as well. So therefore 0 drinks for a person that does not want any risk at all from alcohol makes a whole lot of sense. If people do start drinking, there is low risk where it's like 1 to 2 drinks per week. Okay, these are standard drinks per week, not per day, but these are per week. And so therefore there's a bit of increased risk, but not a whole lot. What about moderate risk? So for people in this category, so it's 3 to 6 drinks, they notice that now there's increased types of cancers. So in other words, breast cancer, colon cancer increases. So for what they basically did is looked at people and said, how much do you drink? And then what happened to these people? And over now many years, they now track that the more you drink, the more conditions that you'll develop, in this case, particularly cancer. Now, what about a very high risk? So these are people with 7, 8 or more drinks per week. And then what you could see here is now you've got heart disease and stroke, and you've got all sorts of other complications as well. So they use this as a way of telling you your actions will change your future diseases. So if you want lower risk, let's just manage them very well. And you'll notice these are per week, not per day in terms of alcohol consumption. So let's pay attention to these ones and reduce our risk over time. How does alcohol go into your body? Well, alcohol goes through your stomach and then it gets absorbed. And then through the blood vessels, it goes to your liver. And your liver processes off the alcohol, and then we're good, okay? What happens if I drink more of it? If I drink more of it, more will be absorbed, more will go to the liver, and at some point the liver will not be able to process all the alcohol off. And so what will happen is now there'll be some alcohol that gets out, okay? So in other words, it hasn't been taken care of. It will now get out into the bloodstream. And once it goes into the bloodstream, then it can go to your brain, and your brain does not function well on alcohol. So that's why when people say, I kind of feel tipsy and woozy and I don't really know what I'm doing, or worse, somebody that says, I blacked out, it means that your computer shut off. There was so much alcohol that your computer shut off. So normally there shouldn't be alcohol reaching your head. Your liver should have taken care of it if you're drinking reasonable amounts. If you drink more, then it's going to get past your liver, and that's when we start feeling tipsy, and that's blackout would be a lot of alcohol reaching your brain. So therefore, just remember that when you start feeling tipsy and stuff like that, it means that your liver is no longer able to clear off the alcohol quick enough, and now you have raw alcohol heading in that direction, and therefore you have alcohol affecting different parts of your body as well. Here's smoking, and I just have one word. This guy's amazing. He is in the Guinness Book of World Records. I hope that, nobody tries this stunt, but there is no safe level of cigarettes. So it's not like, 0 to 1, that kind of thing. Just cigarettes have so many chemicals in them, about 4,000 when you burn them. And so therefore we would like everybody to be off cigarette smoking if you can, including the vaping and everything else, and including marijuana as well. That would be the safest for people. What about exercise? She looks horribly angry. So do we have to do that severe, heavy exercise, those kinds of things? And I must admit, in the past, we said no pain, no gain, that kind of thing. And I think it turned a lot of people off because people said, my knee is bad and my back is bad and so on and so forth. And so most people just sat there. So this is definitely not good. So sitting there is no good. We're now realizing that even if you just move, in other words, you just get up and move, it gets the circulation going. And basically when you don't move, your body will shut down that particular area. It's kind of like if you don't use that room, you turn off the lights. So your body is very good at that because your muscles are very expensive to keep. In other words, we have to, keep them up, right? We have to feed them and give them blood flow and things like that. So muscles are very expensive. So that's why when you sit down, your body will cut off the flow or reduce the flow to your muscles. So if you're not using your legs, it's going to sort of reduce. It's kind of like saving. It's kind of like your heater is trying to save you at home some energy costs. So what happens is that when we close it down, now your pressure goes up, right? Because the pipes are tight and now you're pumping against this thing. So what they notice is that if you're sitting for a long time, then all your arteries are kind of squeezed in this position. Now your heart is working harder. But if you just get up and move around, then all of a sudden the pipes open up because you need to supply blood to the muscles and get them moving. And so just doing that, just getting up and moving around is really good, that you get a huge benefit of that. Of course, if you actually do exercise, it'll be even better, but at least we can get a huge benefit just by moving around. So now the key is sitting is not good. So sitting is the bad behavior. If we can just move around, even walking around, you don't have to do weights or anything like that. It is always already going to be an improvement. If you have one of these Fitbits or whatever else, it kind of motivates you. So if that kind of thing motivates you, then get one of these things, and then that way it'll remind you that you need to do 10,000 steps. And if you think about 10,000 steps in a day, you can't be sitting too much. So instead of thinking, okay, I got to keep, running, for this 10,000 steps, it's more about staying active throughout the day. And what about for COVID patients that are exhausted or elderly that have arthritis and things like that? There's now a lot of things saying, can we do some bed exercises, So for example, you have your foot on your pillow and then you just do ankle pumps, okay? And that's going to get the blood flow going all the way down there. You could do the heel slide, so you kind of become a teepee. So you slide your heel towards your butt and then therefore your knee will come up. It's very good for the joints because there's no pressure, but you're oiling them up, you're moving them around, and your muscles are getting a bit of a workout as well. You could throw a bed sheet down by your foot and you can pull, on your foot. So you can pull your leg up and then push against your arms. So now you're working your arms and your legs as well. You could do shoulder lifts, so you're lying there and then you're moving your arm. And if let's say you have shoulder problems, instead of lifting it up, we just let you do a snow angel. In other words, leave your arm on the bed and then you just kind of loop out like that, like a snow angel when you did as a kid. And that's really good for your shoulder and it gets the blood flow and circulation going. And you could do chest stretches, so you can pull your shoulders back and then you can do this. So then you can even work the core a little bit. You can do some twisting and turning, so therefore you're working your back as well. So these are all things that you could do in the bed. In other words, you don't have to, have any gyms or anything like that. You can do a lot of things sitting in a chair while you're watching TV as well. So these are very simple things and very safe to do as well. And you can oil up your joints. A lot of people say when I get up in the morning, it feels terrible. So what I tell people to do is before you change position from lying to getting up, just wiggle around like a fish, kind of get those oil your joints, I guess, if you will. So all those little hinges need a little movement. And when you move it, then the oil goes in. And then when you get up, you won't feel like 900 years old. So that's something that you could do, whether you're getting up from bed, going into a sitting position, or going from a chair or a couch to a standing position. Just wiggle and get all the joints moving. If you're sitting in a car for a long time at the red light, you can do a little wiggle, and that will help with all the joints as well. And if you look at the measuring your heat, okay, so if we were to scan you, what we find is that the person on the left, where it has the yellow legs, means that they've been sitting around. In other words, the circulation isn't going down there. And that's not a bad thing. It's just your body's trying to conserve, right? So if you're not moving your legs, I'm not going to send a huge amount of blood flow down there. But the person on the right, you can see there's more even distribution of heat, which means there's more even distribution of blood. So the person on the right-hand side, you can imagine the blood flow is very nice and smooth. The person on the left-hand side, you've got blood flow here, but the legs are not getting as much blood flow. So just moving your legs around, even when you're sitting there and just moving your feet up and down, that will increase the blood flow going down. So don't sit still. I guess that's the thing. I mean, we used to tell kids not to fidget. Now we have to tell people, we want you to fidget. We want you to move around as well. In terms of how much do you have to do, if you're a 200-pound person to burn off 1 pound of fat, you would have to run at 10 miles an hour for 128 minutes, to burn that much calories off. If you're walking 4 miles an hour, you have to do 448 minutes. If you're just sitting there, you need 2,182 minutes to burn that pound of fat off. So that's why physical activity, I think is still very important for us to try and keep the flow going, keep your muscles strong, and also to get rid of some of those calories for us as well. And finally, the blue zone people, you've heard about these people. These are areas where they live to past 100, like just insane number of people live past 100. And so they looked at these places. So there's a place in California, Costa Rica, Italy, those kinds of Japan. And so they looked and saw what was special about them. And in the article, they basically said they have a lot of community. There's a lot of people around them. So they're not alone. So the elderly are hanging out with the young people as well. And they're working, like they're actually cooking and cleaning and building fences and things like that. And this fellow, it was funny, he was building a fence and the reporter asked him, why are you doing this? And he goes, because the fence is is broken. It's almost like, don't you get it? So in other words, to that elderly person, and I think he was like 100, basically, that's what needs to be done. And it doesn't cross his mind that he's old, therefore he shouldn't do it. He just does it and everything is done. And in terms of these folks, you can see that they can do handstands. They're very agile, and they do a lot of physical activity. And part of all of this stuff is this community network. So they hang together, they eat together, and it keeps them all young. And when they looked at what they ate, okay, you could see the kinds of foods that they ate. So this is in Italy, this is in California, and this is the Japanese people over here. And you can see that there's an overlapping theme. They have a lot of family around them, no smoking, plant-based foods. So in other words, not a whole lot of meats and things like that. Constant activity, social engagement, and legumes. So if you look at the kind of what's the same amongst all of these 100-year-olds, that would be the commonality. So connection with other people, that keeps your brain going. Physical activity gets the circulation going, and let's not put anything bad into your body. So smoking would be something bad, and then maybe too much red meat might not be so good. So plant-based might be the way to go. And so the bottom line I'm hoping that I've done for you is balance. Okay, this is a crazy motorcycle here, and I'm thinking that what we need to do is not go too much in one direction. So that's why I have a little bit of concern when people say, oh, I'm going to go into the all cheese diet, for example. Like eating cheese only can't be healthy for you because you're missing a lot of components. So remember, your body needs to build a lot of different things to stay healthy. So therefore, we need to give the body all of the components, all the pieces that it needs. It's like trying to build a huge building. Like if I don't give you, cement, you can't build a building. If I don't give you metal, you can't build a building. If I don't give you glass, you can't build a building. So you need those components. So when we say glass is bad or, cement is bad, well, we need them all together. But the key thing is the proportion. In other words, if we eat too much, then that becomes bad. So too much of something is no good. Like even water, rain in small amounts is fantastic. But when it's torrential flooding, that's no good. So like everything else in nature, what we're looking for is balance. So the right amounts is what we're looking for. And that's what I'm hoping that we can all do. So post-pandemic, let's get the right amounts in proportion, and therefore we can lead a good, long, healthy life. And hopefully we won't have many complications as we go into the future. And finally, I thought I'd share with you just this one thing, just see if you can read this. And it's very interesting. I had a professor that showed us this thing. And he said, your brain is amazing. Nature is amazing. You didn't know that you could read these words that are all jumbled up, but it was already built in. So it's kind of like your smartphone. It could do all these things automatically. So our body is built automatically to handle certain situations to keep us alive. So in other words, when there's stressful situations, those kinds of things, your body is handling it. However, in our modern society, maybe those systems are not able to handle the current stress and those kinds of things. And that's when we have to step in, and we have to make sure that we sleep well, we eat well, we do our exercise, we reduce stress, and so on and so forth. So we now need to step in because the automatic system is out of date, because we're in the modern times and we have modern things that we have to deal with. And that's when we have to step in and do a few of these manually, I guess, if you want to think of it that way. And I like this picture of never give up. So here's this frog still choking the crane. And in other words, it is not too late. Okay, so let's say you're overweight right now and you've tried a million different things. Let's just try 1,000,001. And let's not go crazy. Our goal is not to lose 50 pounds all at once. Our goal is nice and steady. And that's really what we're looking for, is a steady, balanced life, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. And if you start earlier, of course, you'll get the benefit earlier. But like I said, it's never too late to start. And why don't we all start today? And that way we'll have a much healthier future. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. And I'll just finish with one little joke that I had, which is a label from this garment, and it says, remove child before washing. I never thought that I would be reading something like this. But bottom line is that it's not complicated. Okay, so all of this stuff is not complicated. We just have to take us off the automatic mode and do a little bit of manual adjustment to get that balance just right. Anyway, thank you very much, and thank you for the organizer, Dr. Pandey, and Mrs. Pandey, for organizing this and also allowing me to speak. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Peter. That was lighthearted but inspirational and educational. To you, the audience, what SMART goals were you able to set from his talk today? I think we can all use a bit of a wellness break now. Cindy Catton is a registered kinesiologist and personal trainer and the owner and operator of Citrus Root Personal Training here in Cambridge. She specializes in exercise programming for complex medical conditions such as diabetes and heart disease. Cindy, we are ready for our first workout of the day.
Thanks for joining me. We're going to do some physical activity. Start with some marching. If you prefer to be sitting down, absolutely. You can stay in the kitchen chair, you can sit on the couch, whatever you're most comfortable with. If you like to stand up and join me, please go ahead now. Start with just some regular up and down with the feet. If this isn't working for you or you feel like it's too intense, slow down the pace a little bit. Whatever you're comfortable with today. We want you to enjoy physical activity, and now that the sun is shining, join me again. Stepping, walking, whatever you feel comfortable with. When you're ready, we can add in a little bit of arm work. You can do some bicep curls. You can change position if you want to. Now we're going to start to increase the intensity a little bit. When you're ready, start side tapping, side to side. You can leave the arms for a few seconds while we get to this new position. Stepping side to side, or just toe tapping. If you need to slow it down, that's okay too. Whatever you're most comfortable with, moving around a little bit today. Again, back into that marching position, and if you want to, side step, side step, side step, back into that marching position. If you're ready, add in some more bicep curls. Moving the arms a little bit, increasing the intensity. We're gonna change positions again. When you're ready, again, you can slow it down or you can sit down whenever you want to. Tap to the front, tap to the front. You got it. I hope you're joining me at home. Step to the front, step to the front. Slow it down if you need to, sit down if you want to. Now do those side taps, side taps, side taps. You got it. Back to the front. Good, increasing the intensity. You guys look great at home. I know you're doing this with me. Back to that marching position. Here we go. When you're ready. If you need to, take some nice deep breaths now. In through the nose and out through the mouth. That means you're just slowing down a little bit, trying to regulate your breathing. We want you to feel comfortable when you're exercising, and this is a great way to do it. Here we go, side steps again, side step, or just tap and slow it down, tap and slow it down. Back to that marching position, and then we're moving to tap out front, tap out front, tap out front. Go a little quicker if you want to, increasing the intensity a little bit, and now we're gonna add the arms. Here we go. Bicep curls and march, bicep curls and march. Looking good, everyone. Keep going. Here we go. Tap to the side. We're changing our arm position. Good work. Stay with me. We're almost there. And tap to the front. Swing the arms out front. Nice work. Keep going. Remember, you can sit down at any time. Good. And back to that marching. Swing the arms if you're comfortable. And breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Good. All right, are you ready to increase the intensity again? Yes, you are. I know you're gonna love this. Ready? Here we go. Inhale. Take those arms up. Exhale. And again, inhale. And exhale. Good. Now a big side step and back. Step and back. Add a little lunge or a little squat if you feel comfortable. A little lunge or a squat. Good work, everyone. Okay, we're gonna switch again. Go back to that marching in the center. Good. And now we're gonna step forward. Nice big step. Lunge forward. Back we go. Lunge forward. Back we go. Adding in those big muscles so we can start to increase the intensity a little bit. Straight out front. Looking good, everyone. We're almost there. Last one, here we go. And back to that march. Okay, we're gonna do those in higher intensity ones here. Here we go. Increase. Exhale. Again. And exhale. Good. Big side step. Yes. Together. Other side. Yes. You guys are looking great. Here we go. Back to the center. And forward step. Nice big step. Bring those arms out front. Nice big step. Looking good, everyone. Hang in there. A few more. Nice and tall. Okay, you're almost there. Last one, last one. Good work. Back to that center. March it here. We need to inhale through the nose exhale through the mouth. Nice work. Inhale and exhale. Good. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Cindy, for showing us these great exercises we can do in the comfort of our own homes. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to our next speaker, Dr. Michael Vallis, a registered psychologist practicing in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I am proud to say that he is an associate professor in family medicine at Dalhousie University, my alma mater. His main areas of expertise are diabetes, obesity, and cardiovascular risk. And he is an active researcher focusing on motivation, behavioral change, and psychological adaptation to chronic diseases. He consults nationally and internationally and has received recently the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Award from the Government of Canada for his work. With great honor and pleasure, I ask Michael to address us today on strategies to make long-term change in our behavior to improve our heart health. Michael.
Hi there. My name is Dr. Michael Vallis. I'm a psychologist from Dalhousie University in Halifax. And my area of expertise is in behavior change through motivation. And I'd like to present this presentation to you today called Harness Your Motivation to Move Forward. In understanding this presentation, I'd like to cover three main topics. First, I want to talk about motivation, how to get it, but importantly, how to keep it. I want to talk about behavior modification. When you're motivated, how do you actually make changes that last? And I want to talk about stress management, because most of us find that as stress goes up, our ability to follow through on our motivation goes down. And so let me begin by this question. What's the big deal? We all know what to do, so it should be easy, right? How many of us don't know that healthy eating is good for us? And we pretty much can do this occasionally. Physical activity. We know the benefits of being active. Sleep. We know how important it is to maintain our good sleep habits. We know to curb alcohol to keep within safe limits, and we know that smoking is dangerous. So given that we know what to do, it should be easy, shouldn't it? Well, as it turns out, we struggle. And I'm showing you here a map describing the challenges that Canadians face in achieving healthy eating guidelines, particularly with regards to fruits and vegetable intake. In essence, 70% of us are eating in an unhealthy manner. Isn't that interesting? We know what to do. We're not doing it. Here are data on physical activity in Canada, showing that around 60% of us actually are inactive. We're not meeting targets for being physically active, despite what we know. This is a series of studies that take a very broad look at how people are doing with regard to their behaviors. And you can see that when these very large-scale epidemiological studies are done, only 12.5% of these people in the US met the criteria for being a healthy weight, eating well, and exercising. And over 50% have 2 or 3 lifestyle risk factors for chronic disease. So even though we know we're not doing, and that's probably one of the most important first points to address when we talk about motivation. Things are looking pretty bleak for us. Type 1 and type 2 diabetes is continuing to grow, and here you're seeing the International Diabetes Federation's predictions that by 2045, we will experience between 2021 and 2045 a 24% increase in North America in the risks of developing diabetes. And you can see on the right this growing escalation of the numbers of individuals living with diabetes. Here are some recent data from the World Obesity Federation showing how obesity rates are increasing across our country, how they're increasing in men, how they're increasing in women, boys, girls, the economic risks associated with this. And you can see these are very problematic findings. So much so that currently we have around half of Canadians living with chronic diseases, and over 73% of elderly people, 65 and above, living with chronic conditions. So even though we have a lot of knowledge and many of us have abilities, we're still not following through. This is looking at the US and talking about what puts people at risk. And you can see the top indicators of risk to life are associated with behaviors: tobacco use, high BMI, dietary risks, alcohol use, etc. So much so that World Health Organization has actually made the suggestion that about 80% of premature heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and 40% of cancers could be prevented through healthy diet, regular physical activity, and avoidance of tobacco products. So we know what's good for us, but we don't seem to be doing so well. So now we come back to our question: what's the big deal? We know what to do, so it should be easy, right? Well, wrong. Why is healthy behavior so uncommon? And there's an interesting answer to this question. And the answer is healthy behavior is abnormal behavior. And so motivation is really required because you're swimming against a current. You're actually pushing into the wind when you think about adapting and adopting healthy lifestyle behaviors. What do we know about behavior? We know that attention is limited. You can't pay attention to everything that's going around. And therefore, our attention is like a beacon of a spotlight. Now, what that means is that as much behavior as possible gets shifted to automatic processing, into autopilot. Think about your driving skills. When you first learned to drive, you had to pay very, very close attention to what you were doing. But after you learned how to do it, it became automatic. And so much of our behavior is automatic. And then what happens is we get comfortable. We like familiar. We like our routines. We stay in the habits that we've developed. And so when it comes time to change, everybody might think, oh, yes, I do want to change. But what we know about behavior is because of what I'm showing you here, when we're faced with change, we react. And so it's important for us to understand that there's barriers that we have to overcome. And I'm showing you the human brain because it's a very interesting challenge that we face right now. What I'm showing you is on the right, in that green area of the brain, which is the midbrain, a primitive part of the brain, below consciousness, there is a behavioral control system. It's called the hedonic system. And basically, it's your emotional system. It's what you feel like doing. It's what you'd like to do. It's what makes you comfortable. A lot of behavior is driven from this system. On the left, you're seeing what's called the executive system of the brain, what we call the frontal lobes. And this is the logical brain, what you should do. So in other words, we have two operating systems controlling behavior at the same time. One is feeling based. It's early in the morning, you haven't slept really well, your bed is really, really cozy, you feel like just staying and sleeping. And we have a logical system that tells you it's the only way you can get exercise is if you get up early and get out there. And this is a battle that we do. It's actually really important to understand this, and I'm showing you this Nobel Prize-winning psychologist, Daniel Kahneman, who really helped us to understand these two brain systems, what he calls the fast thinking and the slow thinking. And most of our thinking is fast thinking, it's automatic. And so much so that what we know really would suggest to us that the dominant behavioral characteristics that most of us would demonstrate are really influenced by pursuing pleasure, minimizing effort, and making choices that bring the best benefit to you in the moment. And so you can see in the society that we live in, this becomes really, really challenging. And I'll just talk about the pleasure principle, for instance. Do you know that two substances light up the pleasure centers of the brain equally? And those two substances are sugar and cocaine. As a matter of fact, the evidence suggests that sugar is more addictive than cocaine. And yet think about the foods we eat that are just peppered with sugar. It makes it pretty clear the struggle that we have to achieve behavior. So developing healthy habits really requires us overcoming many of these behavioral characteristics, habits, and automatic processes. We live in an environment that is really challenged, where we are exposed to ultra-processed food, big portions everywhere, anytime, advertised to look healthy, brought to your front door. The food environment in which we exist is really, really dangerous. We don't have time anymore. Our lives are super busy, and we're dominated by traffic that is stressful. And when you're in traffic and you don't have any time, of course you're going to go through a drive-through. And of course, when you do, you'll be exposed to foods in large quantities, and you'll be too tired at the end of the day, so you'll just want to relax and enjoy yourself. So the environment in which we live really pulls for unhealthy behavior. This is normal. So what it tells us is that it's normal to have what we psychologists call ambivalence, to be pulled in two directions. I know what I should do, but I feel like doing this. This is the normal state of the human brain, which is why motivation is so important. So now let's ask the question, what is motivation? And is it really wanting something? I hear this all the time. I really want to lose weight. I really want to be fit. I really want to eat healthier. And many people think about that, what they really would like to achieve as motivation. I sometimes think about it, and it's partly true, but it's partly not true. It sort of orients you towards a goal, but in fact, it sort of tells us that you want to be at the goal. And what we know about behavior change is that wanting to be at the goal isn't the same as doing all the work to get to the goal. And so motivation isn't so much about being at the goal line, but wanting to do the work to get to the goal line. This is motivation when you're facing barriers. So when we talk about motivation, what we're really trying to help people achieve are personal, meaningful reasons to overcome the barriers. In other words, it may not be easy, it may not be fun, but is it worth it? And if you have personal, meaningful reasons to engage in a certain behavior, this is what motivation is. So if we think about the choice that most of us face between having an apple or having a piece of apple pie, how do we choose apple over apple pie when we know that apples are always healthier than apple pie? Apple pie always tastes better than apple because it's got more sugar in it. So how do we choose apple over apple pie? Well, it turns out it's actually not a choice between apple and apple pie. The question really is, what's important enough to you to not have the apple pie for? Now, if you could answer that question, then you're going to be tapping into motivation. So it's not about what you should be doing, but it's about what's important to you to do. Let me ask a question. Obviously, this is a recorded presentation, so it's a rhetorical question. How long does it take for a new habit to form? 28 days, 6 weeks. Many people who started New Year's resolutions before they failed, they have now failed. It's almost the end of March, and most people have failed. But after a few weeks, they had a habit going. How long does it take for a new habit to become sustained? And you've probably picked up that most New Year's resolutions have failed by the time you get to April. And it actually takes between 2 to 5 years for a new behavioral habit to become so ingrained that it will be sustained over time. And so it's really important we help people actually during this period of time. Now, when we ask people who are working on changing behavior, what words does someone use when they run into a barrier that interferes with behavior? They call it a setback. They call it a failure. And how common are barriers that interfere with behavior? Well, let's just examine New Year's resolutions. So no matter what city you're from, I bet you thousands upon thousands of people in your city started a New Year's resolution. And 85 to 90% of those people have failed. Why? They ran into barriers. And so really, what's wrong with this picture? If barriers are so common, and yet when we encounter a barrier, we consider it to be a setback or a failure or a negative event, can you see the challenge there? If we don't take into consideration the fact that barriers are to be expected, they're normal, and motivation isn't just wanting to be at the goal line, but being willing to pick yourself up and continue in the face of barriers, it makes the situation different. But in my work, I uncover this a lot where people try and then they give up because the barriers are too difficult. And many of the times they weren't expecting these barriers to be there And so the reason that they feel that they have given up is because they're disappointed in themselves. And as you think about motivation for new health behaviors, I'd like you to think about how you can maintain a strategy such that even when you run into challenges, you're willing to continue to work to overcome those. So when we think about behavior change, I often like to think that there's the getting there, which is how do you get started? There's making it happen, but you're not quite done yet. Then you've got to find out, can you stay there or will you slip and fall? And many people, like a New Year's resolution, start, they do it, but they can't sustain it. So we're really talking about how to help people make and maintain changes. I really like this analysis of behavior. I would suggest that all of those people who started a New Year's resolution on January 1st would have benefited from asking themselves these two questions. And those two questions are, what gets behavior started? So January 1st, why did people get going on their New Year's resolution? Well, because there were some advantages of changing. They saw the pros of changing, and they didn't really want to stay the same. They saw the negatives in staying the same. So this is what motivates behavior, gets it started. But you're not quite done yet. The second question you have to ask is, what gets behavior stopped? The majority of people who take on New Year's resolutions don't continue with them. And what gets behavior stopped is the pros of staying the same. Your old behavior has some advantages to it. And the cons of changing. Change is hard, it's a new you, it may take time, it may take effort, it may take money. And so what this suggests is that if you're going to take on a behavior, it'll be very important for you to think about pros and cons of changing and pros and cons of not changing, because it's really about tipping the balance towards. Now, as a person sort of thinks about their motivation, I find it very interesting because people are focused mostly when it comes to behavior change on what should I do? And they're actually looking for a method. The problem is maybe the method will not work for everybody. And so I found this quite interesting. I wasn't aware of this, but apparently in December of 2019, for the very first time in that month, Google searches for the term intermittent fasting exceeded searches for the ketogenic diet. It kind of looked like the population was shifting their interest from ketogenic diets to intermittent fasting. This is so typical of how we approach behavior. If it works for someone, then I guess it's going to work for me. And the other challenge that we face, particularly in the society in which we live, is we live in a very go big or go home society. We promote people who do marvelous things. But when it comes to behavior change, it's usually the pedestrian small steps that are the pathway to success. So many people start focusing on what should I do, what should I do? And they look around and they try to model off of other people, or they try to think about, goals in their big sense. This is not effective. I just want to show you this because it's quite important, and it links back to the question of, what's the best diet for a person? And this is just a study that looked at comparing very different diets. And don't worry too much about the data, but if you look at the pattern on the right, you'll see two graphs. The first one is when it compared different diets, and you can see those lines are straight. Didn't matter what diet, they were all the same. But look at the figure on the right. That shows the people who can adhere to the diet. So it didn't matter what the diet was. The diet that works for a person is the diet that they can actually adhere to. So rather than saying, what is it that I should be following, you can say, what can I sustain? What am I actually able to do? So people do not fail diets. Diets fail people. And so we shouldn't be as much focused on what should I do, but why and how? Why do I want to do this work? And how am I going to go about doing it? Finding motivation is really about asking these questions. Why do you want to change? What are you going to do with this changed behavior? How's it going to make your life better? How's it going to really make your life richer? What are your personal, meaningful reasons that make the work of change worth it? As you get started, what are the barriers? And do you have a plan to deal with those barriers? And what are the supports? Who will help you? So you kind of begin the journey where you have a reason to do it, you know what you're going to run into, and you have supports for maintaining those behaviors. And so the steps to success, so when you're considering any behavior, I'm going to show this slide to you twice. Once I'm going to show it to you in terms of the experience, and the second I'm going to show it to you from the perspective of evidence. And the first step to success is, are you actually interested in doing something? So if somebody's talking about a potential way of eating healthy or being physically active, should you jog? Should you swim? Should you walk? Should you do, kind of Nordic walking? What is it that you should do? Well, first the question to ask yourself is, does it interest you? And if it doesn't, be wary. Even if somebody else does it, even if the Kardashians do it, doesn't mean that you're going to do it. So if you're not interested, don't do it. And when you do it, are you glad you did? Do you have that immediate, oh, this was good? And then the third step is, when you do it, do you want to do it again? So try to think about a behavior that's going to provide all three of these steps. Now, the scientific answer to the question is that success is associated with people finding behaviors they can stick to. So you're not failing your approach to behavior. The behavior that you're not able to do is not the right behavior for you. What is it that you can do? And as you then start to focus in on what you can do, you start to push yourself into more and more challenging situations. And this develops confidence. Psychologists call this self-efficacy. The confidence to overcome the barriers. And the third step is intrinsic motivation, personal, meaningful reasons. And so maintaining motivation in this pathway is really to try to reflect on how this helps you. So self-esteem is critical. Can you make the activity part of your identity? So if you start to think of yourself as a healthy eater, or you think about yourself as an athletic person, this will become really important. If they're not part of your identity, they'll always be hard work and easy to neglect. So in a way, learn to like the new you, embrace those changes. It's also really important to understand values-based goals. So values are things that are really super important to you. And they really describe the kind of person that you want to be. And so you're never done. You're always kind of working towards those. And they're really, really nice because they can allow you to set goals to work towards. So if you have values like you want to be present in relationships, you want to be a loving and active grandmother, you want to set up positive examples to others. So these are values that will allow you to do two things. One is to keep going over time. And the second is to keep going in the face of barriers. And so I like to think about it this way. Goals can come and go. How many times can you run a 10K race or, walk around, the lake before you get tired of it? But values, you never get tired, right? When's it okay for an honest person to be dishonest? When do caring people stop caring? And basically they don't. And so we try to think about those kinds of values that you would have that would allow you to move forward. Personal, meaningful values are associated with the strength to continue with the behavior. And so this is really, maybe the best way to wrap it up is why are you bothering to do all the hard work of change? And if you can keep that in mind, that will guide you. I want to talk now about behavior modification. And I'm showing you that there are really 4 really important behavior modification strategies. The first we call goal setting or action plans. And we often talk about SMART goals, and you can see them here. SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Remember that phrase, go big or go home. It's really what undoes so many people because they take on too much. That's what happens with most people with New Year's resolutions. Nothing wrong with what they're doing, but often they take it on too much. So let's say somebody wants to be physically active, so they join a gym. And then they set a goal of going, 4 times a week for an hour at a time. They find after a few weeks, it's just exhausting them and it's interfering with other activities. So there was nothing wrong with them wanting to become physically active. Their motivation was fine. They just took on too much. So I often like to think about goal setting as being worth doing and doable. So you kind of have to push yourself enough that you're going in the right direction, but it has to be doable. And if it's not doable, if you think you can't do it, if your confidence isn't high, reduce the goal so you're confident you can do it. It's more important to build confidence over time than it is to achieve large steps. And again, I'll just refer to New Year's resolutions as a way of understanding some of the challenges of taking on too much. The second behavior modification strategy is equally important. It's called behavior shaping. And it's sequencing your goals. So if you think about a SMART goal, and think about sequencing SMART Goal 1, SMART Goal 2, SMART Goal 3, SMART Goal 4, SMART Goal 5. And if you could sequence these experiences, what ends up happening is that the person develops a sense of success. I can do this, I can do this. And you build on that. And that creates the confidence to overcome the barrier. That's called behavior shaping. These first strategies, goal setting, behavior shaping, are things that you can do. The last two, stimulus control and reinforcement management, are kind of external. Stimulus control is about, I like to think about it as a personalized, healthier built environment. How can you change your environment to make it easier for you to be healthy? So for instance, don't bring potato chips into your house if you find that you have a habit of eating large amounts of potato chips. If you want a potato chip, go have it, but you have to get out of your house to get it. If you find that it's difficult to remember to take your medications, well, put your medications out on the counter right beside your coffee pot. So you can't make your coffee in the morning without running into your pills. Great reminder. You can see what I'm doing here is altering the environment. And then the final strategy is setting a goal and getting a reward. So try to find things that you could administer, maybe music you like to listen to, or books you like to read, or chatting with friends, or visiting relatives, or whatever would be small amounts of positive activities. Maybe you'd put a toonie in a jar every time you sort of did a walk or made a new recipe, and over time this would add up and you would be able to buy something. Many people, when they stop smoking, they'll do something like put the money that they would spend in cigarettes in a jar every week, and then within a year they've got a trip to Cuba for vacation. And so these are the behavior modification strategies: goal setting, behavior shaping, stimulus control, reinforcement management. Now, as you think about this, it's important to recognize that we often kind of go big or go home. And so it's really important for us to learn from these processes. So psychologists, when it comes to behavior change, don't like to use the word setback. We like to use the word behavior cycling, where you cycle into and out of an unhealthy behavior, into and out of a healthy behavior. People who are healthy, it's not that they never do unhealthy things. It's just that if they fall off the wagon, they don't fall very far and they get back on quickly. And so it's really important to have that sort of accepting attitude towards yourself as you focus on behavior change. So we've talked about motivation and we've talked about behavior change. Now, I'd like to talk about stress. And the reason that I want to talk about stress is that we can't get away from it. And if we just think about the last few years, if humans like predictability and routine, and COVID completely locked down the world, you could imagine just how stressful that was. And you can see in this slide, there's a bit of a teeter-totter image, and you've got on one side your plan for the day, your intentions, on the other side there's stress. And what do we know about how humans function? We know that as stress goes up, self-care goes down. And so it's really important that we think about strategies to help people manage stress such that they can reduce this effect. If you can keep your stress under control, it'll be a lot easier for you to access your motivation. It'll be a lot easier for you to have the energy to put into your behavior modification. You see the brain slide again. You can remember that brain slide where you had the emotional system and the logical system. Well, here you're seeing it again, but you're seeing it through the lens of the fact that stress will increase the signal from the emotional brain and actually decrease the logical brain. So you'll be much more likely to engage in unhealthy behaviors at times of stress. So stress management is a very useful strategy really for all of us. And when it comes to stress management, there are quite a number of evidence-based coping strategies. And I'm just going to go through each of these for you. And again, it's kind of similar to what I talked about with regard to the behavior change, which is it's not so much about the what should I be doing? Should I be doing this or that? But the why. It's really about, what works for an individual. So what do we know about stress reducing strategies? We know that they're additive. The more you do, the more they help. So as I'm going to show you this list, I want you to think about two things. I want you to think about what can you do from this list in 2, 3, 4 minutes. So if you're having a stressful day, what could you do during the day that might help you manage that stress? Then I want you to think about what you might do when you have some time for stress management. So at the end of the day, at the end of the week, what might you do to kind of reset the clock? So they're additive. They need to be, they need to fit your life. If your stress management is, I don't know, spending 2 weeks on a Cuban beach, well, that's a great stress management technique, but how often can you implement it? So you want to have something that you can implement quite a bit. It's also important to allow yourself to really choose a behavioral coping strategy that fits for you. And so many people will say, well, I tried this, you should try that. Well, sure, try it. But remember, it's individual. You might like it, you might not. And the ones that are going to work for you are the ones that are going to make sense to you and the ones that you're wanting to use. Remember that slide I said, are you interested in doing it? When you do it, are you glad you did? And when you do it, you want to do it again. Those are the ones that you want to go for. All right, so the evidence-based coping strategies for stress management are physical calming activities. So achieving a calm, peaceful, quiet, reflective moment is really helpful for bringing your stress level down. This could be meditation, this could be reading a book, this could be a cup of tea in a comfortable chair. It could be prayer, it could be playing with a pet, it could be tending a plant. It doesn't matter, but when you'll know it when you find it, when you have that sort of sense of calm, quiet, peaceful, reflective moments. So really allowing yourself to de-escalate. The second coping strategy is kind of the opposite of that. It's burn off the stress. So many physical activities are extremely beneficial from a stress reduction point of view. Many of the stresses that we experience are things that we can't control. They're financial, they're relationship, they're health related, and we just can't sort of turn them on or turn them off. So we have to live with stress. And so, finding strategies that sort of allow you to burn that off. Now, it could be formal exercise, it could be dancing, it could be moving around, it could be whatever works for you. The third coping strategy is to be socially connected. Humans are social beings, and when we're in times of stress, it's really beneficial to reach out and connect to others. Just imagine if we'd gone through COVID without social media, where we couldn't have Zoom meetings, where we couldn't reach out to our friends virtually. We would have been in a lot more difficult of a situation. So social connection. Emotional expression. Importantly, not bottling up feelings, but allowing us to express our feelings in whatever way works. So I'm not talking about, going on Oprah Winfrey and, talking out your feelings for 30 minutes. Many forms of art, many forms of hobbies are emotionally discharging for people. They feel like they can kind of create something, and creative arts are actually a really useful way of expressing. So, just think about whatever it could be. It might be verbal, it may be physical. It doesn't really matter. You'll know it if you find it, a sense to which you've, felt that whatever's been bottled up there has been released. And then the final strategy is really one of acceptance and sort of being present in the moment. And I often think about that serenity prayer, sort of control the things you can, accept the things that you can't, and have the wisdom to know the difference. And so this is also, I think, really effective. So you can see there are a number of different coping strategies. So when you review this slide, I hope that you would think, wow, there's a lot for me here. Some of the things that you're seeing on the slide are things that you're already doing. Great. Can you do them more often? Can you bring them into your life in minimal ways? So for instance, I don't like driving a lot. I find that if I'm in traffic and I'm at a stoplight rather, I'll take 2 deep cleansing breaths. Takes less than a minute to take 2 deep cleansing breaths, but it brings down my blood pressure, it brings down my heart rate, it brings on a sense of calm. So it's really important for people to be creative as to how they can engage in these activities. I'd also encourage you to find your voice. This is really connecting to the fact that There'll be people around who are supportive, and there will be people around who aren't supportive. And you want to try to protect yourself from people who are not very supportive. You can't really change other people. Keep your friends close, and just remember, if somebody's putting pressure on you, you can just politely say, well, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you, no. It's time for me to leave now. It's time for me to leave now. And if you do that in a polite, calm way, it's very effective. It's called the broken record technique. As we sort of bring this talk to a close, I'd be remiss if I didn't really talk about attitude when it comes to stress and behavior change and motivation. And you see this little cartoon. Charlie Brown is saying, someday we'll all die, Snoopy. And of course, Snoopy the genius says, true, but on all the other days we will not. And so optimism is a habit. And, research really suggests that you can actually do things that can bring about a greater sense of well-being. Devote time to family and friends, practice gratitude and optimism, savor life pleasures, engage in meaningful activities, and try to live in the moment. These are strategies that one can sort of bring into your day at any point in time. Something I always like to remember is that if you want to boost your mood, a random act of kindness towards someone else is a great way of increasing your mood. Finally, as we bring this to a close, have some self-compassion. It's not an easy process to change. Lapses are not failures, they're normal, they're expected, and they're really opportunities for learning. And this is, I think, a nice slide to end on, right? What can I not control? What can I control? And you focus on the things that you can control. So what I've done in this brief presentation is try to touch on motivation, behavior modification, and stress management. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vallis. What a rich source of information. I have learned a great deal today. So, what SMART goals have you set? This day is about you, remember. Let's get going. Let's set those SMART goals and let's get it implemented. Next up, it's a real honor for me to introduce you to Dr. Kim Connolly, a good friend and colleague. He's an academic cardiologist and scientist, a nationally recognized expert in echocardiography, cardiovascular MRI, and the impact of diabetes on cardiac function. He has received numerous awards from the Canadian Cardiovascular Society and the Canadian Institute for Health Research. Dr. Connolly runs a basic research laboratory at the Keenan Research Centre at St. Michael's Hospital at the University of Toronto, focusing on mechanisms that lead to heart disease. His work will lead to the breakthroughs of tomorrow, but he's here today to speak to us about advancing cardiac care to the next level and tell us about the breakthroughs of today that are already changing the lives of so many people with heart disease. Kim.
Greetings, everyone. My name's Dr. Kim Connolly, and it's my pleasure to be with you all today to discuss really future advances in how we can improve the heart's function so that folks can live a better, longer life. So I've entitled this talk today, Newer Cardiac Treatments, Smaller, Easier, and Better. And so in the next 30 minutes, we'll talk about where we need to move forward in order to make certain that patients get the best possible care, but it's also done in the least invasive manner. And so we'll talk about how we can approach that, and as we move towards really the 2025, 2026 and beyond. So these are my disclosures. One of the companies that produces these valves, I've been a consultant for. So just what we're going to focus on today is really the valves within the heart. And so this might look like a complicated picture, but I'll take you through it, and then it'll make a lot more sense as the talk progresses and you get a feel for which valves we're attempting to fix and how we might do that. So there are 4 valves in the heart, and for an adult cardiologist not treating kids, the 3 that cause the biggest problems are the aortic valve, which you can see here has 3 cusps, and these are designed to open let the blood eject from the heart and then snap shut and create a watertight seal so that the blood's only moving forward. So the first one's the aortic valve. You'll see over here on the right side of the heart, we have a much larger looking valve called the tricuspid valve. And this has 3 leaflets, and you can see the structure is very different from the aortic valve. It's much larger and it operates at much lower pressures. And this is important when we consider how we're going to treat it. Now, on the left side of the heart, one of the other valves that we have issues with, particularly as folks get older, is the mitral valve. And instead of having 3 leaflets, it does in fact have 2 leaflets, a larger one that we call the anterior leaflet and a smaller one at the back called the posterior leaflet. Now, they're actually roughly the same size, but you'll see here when we draw them, they often look as though they are quite different sizes. And then the fourth valve, which is much more of an issue in children, is called the pulmonic valve. And we're not going to focus on that today. That's a topic for another talk. And as I mentioned, the purposes of valves in the heart is that when the heart muscle contracts, that they open up, the blood is ejected from the heart, and that they then, when the heart stops beating, that time in between when it contracts, that they snap shut those valve leaflets and create a watertight seal so that the blood is always moving in one direction. It comes up through the veins on the right side of the body, goes through the tricuspid valve here, and then out the pulmonic valve to the lungs where oxygen is received. It then travels back through the left side of the heart through the mitral valve and gets ejected out through the aortic valve. So that the blood always is continuously moving forward, picking up oxygen, taking it to the muscles and the brain and the kidneys and the liver where the oxygen is then used, and then it flows back through the veins again. So this is really the principles of how these valves are designed. And it helps us understand the problems that can occur with valves. And there's 2 major problems that generally occur. Either the valves over time thicken up so they don't open up properly, and we generally call that stenosis or thickening of the heart valve. And the other problem can occur when the heart valve, instead of snapping tightly shut and creating that watertight seal, it can create leakiness so that the blood, instead of always going forward, can then go forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards. And we call that regurgitation. So the predominant ways that heart valves get into trouble is they become thickened and stenotic, or they become leaky or regurgitant. So you'll hear these terms as we go on in the talk today, and hopefully it'll become a little bit clearer when you see the images that I'll show you, so you'll understand which valve I'm talking about and the process that's occurred. And we generally say which valve has the problem. So if the aortic valve is very thickened, we call it aortic stenosis. If the aortic valve is leaky, it's aortic regurgitation. And the same with the tricuspid valve, tricuspid stenosis or regurgitation, and the mitral valve. So this is really important as we move forward. Now, in the past, the predominant way which we treated leaky valves was with open heart surgery. And open heart surgery is an excellent operation. It is performed millions of times around the world every year to fix the arteries or to fix the valves or for other reasons. So it's a very safe, it's a very effective operation. But of course, it's a big operation. It involves opening up the chest to get at the heart, to see the heart valve or the arteries and fix them. And so as doctors, what we want to do is come up with ways where we can fix these heart valves much more simply, much more safely, and much more quickly. And that's really what we're going to focus on today. New ways to fix the heart valve that are what we term less invasive, that try to avoid the open heart surgery. Now, in many instances, we can't entirely avoid the open heart surgery. And so sometimes we have what is known as hybrid procedures, where you might have a small cut into the chest, but also one of these other newer procedures that I'll talk about. And the two together then provide the best an optimal treatment for whatever the heart condition we're dealing with. So there's lots of permutations and combinations, and that's really important that if you need one of these valves done, that you sit down with your cardiologist, your heart surgeon, and the other folks that are involved in coming up with the decision plan and work through what needs to be done and what's the best way to address it. And this is important because I think we've evolved over time from where generally you had a cardiologist and a heart surgeon, a decision was made and the operation was done. Now we have so many more treatments that we really now talk about the concept of the heart team. And this is really important here. And you'll see there's a lot of people involved within that. And because of the complexity and the difficulty, and we always know one mind or many minds is better than one, that we really do like to function as a heart team. So we can figure out what is going to be the best treatment and then discuss it with the person who's requiring it and see what their wishes are, and then use that to then hopefully fix the underlying problem. So you'll see there's a lot of people involved in the heart team. There might be the primary care doc who identified there was a murmur and then referred you to the cardiologist, who went on, did some investigations and proved that the heart valve was a problem and needs to be fixed. There's the anesthesiologist who, of course, helps with care when the procedure needs to be done. There's the imaging specialist, those folks that can actually do the CAT scans or the ultrasounds of the heart to prove exactly what the problem is and help guide how to fix it. There is, of course, the heart surgeon, who is often the one who's actually doing the procedure with other members of the team, or the heart failure specialist, who may want to tweak the medications and give advice as to exactly what pills you need to be on, because often with these procedures, it's not just a procedure and it's done, it's a procedure in combination with pills, and that's what's required to make certain that you get better. And we also usually have an interventional cardiologist who's not a surgeon, but a specialist in putting tubes into the heart in order to fix the arteries as well as the valves. And then, of course, equally importantly, we have our members of the nursing team, because they're absolutely vital to ensure that appropriate patient care is done, to working with all the other members of the team to ensure that the plan is really done smoothly right from the beginning all the way through to when you're being discharged from hospital. And of course, the valve coordinator, who's really the person that puts it all together, because you can see there's a lot of moving parts now as we think about what is the right treatment for the particular person sitting in front of you. And that will depend on exactly a number of factors, like how old you are. Have you ever had heart surgery before? What is your heart function like? What is your lungs like? What is your kidney function like? What do you want? These are all important factors, and that's really what the heart team is devised to do, to get lots of different opinions, put it all together, and then come up with the right plan. So let's move away from sort of theory, and let's look at how things have changed over time, that we can actually improve heart function, fix these valve-related problems in much less invasive ways. So let's take the first case here. So this is an 81-year-old person who actually presented to the family doc saying, every time I walk, I get short of breath. Right? I'm really struggling. I used to be able to walk up the stairs quite easily, and now when I walk up the stairs, I can only get up 3 or 4 stairs because I have to stop, and I'm huffing and puffing. And my friends, now they can walk past me. And so appropriately, they went and saw their family doctor, who had a listen to the chest and heard a murmur. And what a murmur is it's either blood rushing through the heart because there's leakiness, or blood rushing through the heart because that valve has become thickened or stenotic. And so typically when that happens, we order a test, and the appropriate test is an echocardiogram or an ultrasound. It's the same technology that women have when they're getting their babies assessed, but this is specifically focusing on the heart, and we look at all the components of the heart muscle, the heart valves, how blood flows through the heart, all those things, and then we can make a formal diagnosis there. So this is what it actually looks like. So this is the echocardiogram and ultrasound. And what we're focusing on here, this is that aortic valve. Now, if you recall, this has got 3 leaflets to it. And normally those leaflets should open and shut nicely, smoothly like this. But if you focus here, this is the aortic valve. You'll see it's very bright, and it's bright because it's become calcified. It's like eggshell in there. And because it's stiffened and scarred up, instead of opening up nicely and closing, it can only barely open up. So this is that thickening of the heart valve that we talked about, called aortic stenosis. And of course, when we do the ultrasound, we look at it lots of different views to get all the information about the heart, but clearly this is what's going on here. And here we have what's known as the left ventricle, and we're looking to see how well the heart muscle is squeezing, because we often offer different treatments if the heart muscle is not squeezing well or contracting normally. But here I'm pleased to say this is in fact contracting normally. Now, not only is the calcium in the aortic valve, over here is the mitral valve, and we can see this brightness, which tells us there's a big chunk of calcium, that eggshell calcification, it looks a bit like an eggshell, that's sitting on the mitral valve as well. So in some folks, you go and find one problem, but there's actually a few different problems that you need to assess. And there's various ways that we can determine how significant the narrowing is. And we do that with what's called the pressure gradient here. Now, in this particular case, the pressure gradient was 75. Anything more than 40 is severe. And so we put all this together, and what we have here is what is known as severe aortic stenosis. The valve is thickened and is narrowed. So back 10, 15 years ago, the only way to efficiently treat this was with open heart surgery. And here you can see what's happened. The surgeon has opened the chest, they've gone in, they have removed the old valve, they've actually cut it out. And here what we've got is a new valve that's being implanted. And this valve, usually in someone who's 81 years of age, will be made out of leaflets. The valve leaflets will come from a pig or a cow heart, and they'll be implanted in a special piece of material here, which is called a bioprosthetic valve. That will be put in the heart, it gets sewn in, and then when the blood's allowed to flow back through the heart, the leaflets will open and shut normally. And it's a very good operation. It is in fact a very safe operation. But of course, in folks who are often elderly and have lots of other health issues, as I mentioned before, lung problems, kidney problems, that in fact the operation may be too much. So new techniques have been developed in order to treat this. And this has now become a much more mainstream treatment there. And this treatment is called a transaortic valve implantation, or a transcatheter based approach, or a TAVI procedure. But in order to know if you can have this, further testing needs to be done, and that's usually a CAT scan. And this is what the CAT scan actually looks like. And what it allows us to do is take very precise measurements. So back 10 years ago, when we first started doing these, you had to be in hospital for 4 or 5 days. It was a complicated procedure. You had to have a long anesthetic. Nowadays, it can be done as quickly as 23 minutes when you're awake, and potentially you could go home that day or the following day. Okay, so we've really seen a dramatic advance, and the CAT scan's been absolutely critical to that. So you'll see here that there's not one test, there's a number of tests that need to be done to determine if you're suitable for this. And there's a lot of specific measurements, and this is where that heart team comes into play, because we need an expert radiologist or cardiologist who's trained in this area to know exactly what the measurements need to be. And that then allows the surgeon and interventional radiologist to plan exactly how we can fix this particular heart valve. So as I've said, used to be open heart surgery in hospital for 5 to 6 days. Nowadays can be done in as quick as 25 minutes when you're awake, a very safe procedure. And so this is what actually looks like. So this is a test where we've injected some dye into the bottom of the heart here. And what we're doing is making certain that all these wires which are in the heart are in exactly the right position, so that we can place the valve exactly where it needs to be. And then what the valve does is we have a balloon inside it, and the balloon blows up and pushes the old valve out the way, and the new valve then goes into the right position here. So just to orientate everyone here, this is the dye going into what's called the aortic root. This sort of dark color here is the calcium. So it's that eggshell calcification telling us the valve's stenotic. This is a pacemaker that's sitting in the heart. Sometimes the heart slows down, so we cover that. And these are other wires that we've got into the heart in order to inject the dye and look at the arteries in the heart. So this is a pretty standard setup. You can do this with being awake. It's very safe. It's very easy to do. And here what we've done is taken an X-ray of it. So this is an X-ray image, which is very different from that ultrasound image we saw before. Now here what we've done is place that wire across the valve, and this funny shaped object here, this is the balloon. So what we've got is now we have the actual wire sitting in the heart, and we've blown the balloon up, and what's that's done is it's actually pushed that old, very thickened valve out the way. So that's been taken out of the system. Now you might worry and say, well, what happens when you blow it up? Maybe bits break off. Well, in fact, it's very, very safe to do that. Now, in some times we do actually try to catch any debris, but it's actually very, very rare that that actually occurs. So for the most part, the wire goes in, the balloon goes up, the old valve is squashed out of the way. And then what we're going to see next is, we'll just move that forward there, is now this is what the actual valve looks like. So now we've placed the valve in the right spot. We're blowing the balloon up and the valve just gets re-expanded. And so you can see this is the metal wire that sits within the heart. And within that are those leaflets that can then open and close normally. So you can see we've gone from having an open heart procedure to now putting the wire in, blowing the balloon up. It takes about 20 or 30 seconds. And then the new valve is implanted into the heart. You take the wires out and it works automatically and efficiently straight away. So you can see it's a very, very simple, safe procedure. And here's another x-ray. And we go on and make certain there's no leaks or there's no other problems with it after the procedure. All standard stuff there to show it's very safe. And then, of course, after that, we do our ultrasound. And what we can see here now is that the blood, which before was really struggling to get past that very tightly narrowed valve, is actually moving forward. And the heart function is very good. And that valve is effectively fixed. And there's very minimal leakiness around it. So this is a very successful procedure. So you can see in the last 10 years, we've had a real game changer in how we treat these heart valves. Now, it's important to note, it's not for everyone. There are some scenarios where we can't do this. And so you need to speak to your cardiologist about that. But for most people, this is a very, very safe and effective procedure. And in fact, it's become so safe and so good that now we're wondering, maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, this will become the procedure that we offer to everyone. So in fact, open heart surgery may become a thing of the past when we're just thinking of opening and fixing the aortic valve. But we need more time and more studies to prove that it's safe and effective in the long term for younger and younger people. Because these valves can wear out. That is the problem with them. Of course, they've got to open and close every time your heart beats. And so they can wear out over time. So we've got to make certain before we offer this as our standard procedure that we can prove that they will, in fact, in younger folks, be able to withstand the normal day-to-day wear and tear that any heart valve needs to undergo. So in the next 5 or 10 years, we're going to have this data. And I expect, based on what we're seeing so far, that this will become the standard procedure and open heart surgery will become a thing of the past. So that's the aortic valve. What about other heart valves that can become affected in the heart? So here we have a second case. This is an 83-year-old person who unfortunately had previously had a heart attack. And the heart attack had damaged the heart muscle, so it wasn't functioning effectively. And after this, they became short of breath. And in the first instance, everyone thought, well, it was just because of the heart attack. But it became clear that there was another problem that was going on that needed to be fixed. And so here we have an ultrasound test of the heart, but this is different than the previous ultrasounds that I'd showed you. The previous ultrasounds was when we put a little tube and we placed it on the chest wall. This is called a transesophageal echocardiogram. And this is a test where you come into hospital, you'll be fasted, you'll have a light anesthetic, and a tube about as thick as my finger actually is placed in the mouth down the throat. And what it allows us to do is get very, very high quality images of the heart so that we can determine exactly what the problem is and figure out exactly the right way to fix it. And what we've done here is we've done what's called color Doppler. Now, what this Doppler is it's actually a way to show if the blood is moving forwards or backwards. And remember we talked about when the heart valve becomes pulled apart before, that it can become leaky. That's called regurgitation. This is exactly what we're seeing here. So all this blood flow here, this sort of funny blue, this yellow, this red color, that's actually when the heart contracts. Instead of the blood going forward, it's actually going backwards. And when it goes backwards in the heart, it goes into the lungs, which means the lungs fill up with fluid, which means you become short of breath. So it makes complete sense why this particular person was having shortness of breath. It was because this valve was now leaky and needs to be fixed, because over time it will put more and more strain on the heart and the heart will get weaker and weaker there. And so what we do is do this test. We do lots of different views to show exactly where the leakiness is, and that then can help us figure out how to fix it. And again, you can see all this blood going backwards every time the heart pumps. So instead of most of the blood going forwards, it's going forwards and back and forwards and backs, and that then causes you to become very short of breath here. And one of the nice things we've recently had is what's called 3-dimensional imaging. So what we've got here on the right is a 3D ultrasound of the heart, and we can see this particular valve has the 2 leaflets, an anterior leaflet and a posterior leaflet here. And we can see there's this gap here, and that's where all that blood is going backwards into the lungs from. So we need to come up with a way to fix that. Okay. And so how have we done that? Well, as I said, in the past, you might have had to have open heart surgery. But nowadays we have a new procedure where we can put a tube directly into the heart, and attached to that is some little clips. And so what we can do is grab the heart valve, pull it back together, and where there was the gap causing leakiness, we can actually repair that. And this is called a MitraClip procedure. And there's 2 different companies that make these, and this is the one that's most commonly used today. And so now what we've done is we've actually put that clip in the heart valve, and we use the ultrasound to show exactly where to go. And here we can see the clips nice and open on the right here. And what we're waiting for is those leaflets of the heart valve to sit within the clip. And then what we do is we grab them and we tighten it all up so that we remove the leakiness there and stop the blood flowing backwards. And here we are taking more images. We go and check back and forth. And on the right here, you can see now those leaflets are sitting nicely within the clip. So now what we're ready to do is tighten that clip up and actually remove the leakiness. And that's exactly what we've done here. And we can check it again with our 3D imaging to know that we've got exactly in the right spot, and to make certain that we've gone from a very leaky valve to a minimally, or in some cases really no leakiness of the valve at all. And that then means the blood, instead of going backwards, can now go forwards. It removes the pressure in the lungs, which means you stop being short of breath and takes the stress off the heart in the long term. Now, unfortunately, that procedure is very commonly done, but it's not perfect for everyone. And so now, in terms of technology, we're looking at different and new ways to develop specific valves that we can put in the heart. But again, these valves, instead of having to do them through the open heart procedure, we can actually use the arteries and veins in the groin, in your leg, place these new valves, which come all squashed up, put them in the heart, and use the balloon again to expand them and fix those heart valves here. So when it's used for the mitral valve, it's called a TMVR, so a transcatheter mitral valve replacement. Or if you use it for the tricuspid valve, it's a TTVR, transcatheter tricuspid valve replacement. And so there's lots of different companies doing work in this area to figure out who's going to develop the best valve moving forward. This is complicated because each time the heart beats, these things can move, they can adjust, they can flick around. So there's lots of different ways which we're trying to come up with in order to identify what's going to be the best way to place these within the heart. So let's have a look at another case here. This is a different person who is 56, who had an ejection fraction of 40%, had bypass surgery, but has lung disease. And we'd previously tried to put one of those clips in, but what we had done, instead of fixing the leakiness, we actually made the valve too stiff. Now, the good thing is when we recognize that, we can simply take the clip off and we can pull out. But what the patient was left with, though, was still a very leaky valve. So then we went back to our surgical team and said, is there any chance you can operate? And they said, no, the chance of death, heart attack, stroke, or a bad outcome is too high. That's not a good option. So then we went back to the companies and said, well, let's look at one of these newer valves and see if we can do that. So here we go back to our ultrasound scan. Remember, the patient, if this was you, you'd have a breathing tube in, you're asleep in the operating room, but the chest is not being open here. And we go back and we look at all our views to figure out that leakiness. And again, you can see all this color going backwards. That's all the blood leaking back into the heart. And then what we came up with this particular valve here, and this is what it looks like. So this is the valve, and this is when it's all squished down on itself. So we're placing it in the right spot, and then we're going to balloon it up and open it up again, and we'll squish the old valve out the way and replace it with our new valve. And so you can see how important the imaging is with this, because this tells us exactly where we are, have we got it in the right spot, and when we should now use the balloon to really put this valve in the right spot, if you will, cement it in the right location so it can function normally. And so what we've done here is we've got the valve and we're getting it ready getting it ready. Here's the ultrasound again. It's not quite done. And now what we've done is actually deployed the valve. So we've blown the balloon up, we've let it expand, it's sitting in the right position. And before we had all that color going backwards. Now it's gone and we only see some color going forwards. So that tells us that we've stopped the leakiness now. And so this is a procedure that's going to continue to develop over time and hopefully will again, like we said with the aortic valve, become a go-to procedure. It's very early days yet. We need a lot more data before this becomes a standard procedure. There's not many centers in Canada or around the world that are doing this, but you can see the technology is almost there that this will hopefully become a mainstream treatment. And this is our 3D imaging. So what we're seeing here, this is that heart valve, and here you can see it opening and closing there. That's that little central portion where the blood flows through. So a very nice result, very excellent result. And this is what it looks like when we do the ultrasound the next day. Here's that valve sitting in the right place, and that's called a Tendyne procedure there. Now, the final issue that we will address in the last few minutes is the tricuspid valve. Now, if you remember, those two valves that I've just been discussing sit on the left-hand side of the heart. And for the last 20 or 30 years, the major issues we've had with the heart in adults has predominantly been on the left-hand side. But now we've become very good at treating those. And what that has meant is that the pressure now has gone back to the right-hand side of the heart. And one of the problems that we've seen in persons who've had very good surgery, like the cases I've showed you, is that the right side of the heart starts to struggle over time, and that the valve on the right side, called the tricuspid valve, becomes expanded and becomes leaky. In the past, we didn't worry about it because we didn't have good treatments. So here you'll see tricuspid regurgitation, or leaking the heart valve, is very undertreated. And because it was left for a long time, we're now starting to see that this is a bigger and bigger problem. And people are coming into hospital with heart failure because of a leaky tricuspid valve, liver issues, kidney issues, and problems with swelling in the legs. And that's because the right side of the heart is directly attached to the veins that drain in from the liver, heart, and legs. So when that becomes leaky, all that fluid, instead of going into the lungs, which occurs on the left side, goes into the liver, the liver, the kidneys, and the leg, and that's where you start to see the fluid. So you can see a different problem there. And so obviously what we need now is new ways to fix that. And this is what the tricuspid valve looks like when, again, this is our ultrasound imaging, and now we're looking directly down on top of the valve here. And you can see it's got three big leaflets to it. This is called the septal leaflet. This is the anterior, and this is the posterior leaflet. But normally what should be doing is this should snap tight and have a watertight seal. And here what we've got is a big gap. So that blood now is going backwards, as I said, back into the liver, back into the kidneys, and creating those problems. And here again, we put our color on, and this jet that you see, boom, boom, here, this is that blood flow going back directly into the liver and kidneys and damaging the liver and the kidneys here. And we take lots of different images to identify exactly where it is. And that then enables us to figure out a way to come up and treat it. And like we did that MitraClip procedure on that mitral valve, here we are doing what's called a tricuspid clip procedure on the tricuspid valve. And this is what that clip looks like. Here it is, it's going down into the heart. We're going to get those leaflets, we're going to grab them, we're going to pull them tightly shut again, tighten it all up, and prevent the leakiness of the heart valve. So that's exactly what we're doing here. And here's once the clip has gone in, we've removed most of the blood flow. It's not perfect, but we've gone from having very, very severe leakiness to only a mild amount. And you can comfortably live with a mild amount for many, many, many years. And of course, this is again a much less invasive procedure where we've gone through the groin instead of having open heart surgery there. But sometimes it doesn't work, and so we have to come up with other ways. And just like we had that valve on the left side of the heart, we also have these for the right side of the heart. So this is a different person where we couldn't do that tricuspid clip procedure. Again, on the right, you can see this leaky, all this color here, that's the blood flow going back into the liver and the kidneys. So we did another CAT scan to figure out what's the right size valve to fix it. And this one's called an EVOQUE tricuspid valve. So you need a lot of detailed measurements to make certain we get into the right spot. And we do that with the CAT scan. We go through, we measure it all. We pre-plan like crazy to make certain we get the right valve at the right time. And then here's what it looks like. Again, this is using our x-rays. This big dark thing here is our is our transesophageal echo, giving us those nice echo images of the heart valve. And this is what it looks like. This is coming up from the groin. We've got our valve and we're getting it ready to expand and push the old leaflets out the way and create a new watertight seal. And again, this is our ultrasound imaging. We're lining it up. We're getting ready to go. I know it looks like a bit of a snowstorm, but trust me, when you do a lot of these, it makes a lot of sense. We're lining it up. And then what we do is we go forward, expand the balloon again, and here we can see where it's been nicely placed. Those old leaky leaflets, they're pushed out of the way. We've got a brand new valve sitting nice and snug. So we've taken away that leakiness or the tricuspid regurgitation. And this is what it looks like at the end of the procedure. Instead of that leakiness, we see a tiny little bit here, but the blood's going forwards instead of going backwards. And often the kidney function and liver function improves dramatically. And so we take, again, lots of different images to know that there won't be any issues with this. So here's the heart team at St. Mike's Hospital. You'll see a lot of people here. It's a big group, and it's important that we need many minds to come up with the right procedures here. My colleague, Dr. Pham. This is Dr. Ong, who actually does all the ultrasound imaging. I do it myself and also we have Dr. Ho here, who's in New York now. This is Dr. Peterson, one of our cardiac surgeons. And then we have our anesthesiologists, our fellows, and all the other members of the team. So if you ever have one of these procedures, you'll see a lot of people, but you need a lot of people to get it done effectively. And this was after at St. Michael's, they did the first catheter tricuspid valve replacement back in May 23, 2019. As I said, it's not mainstream yet. We hope it will be, but we still need to do further advances and understand and prove that these are safe and effective in the long term. So summary then, hopefully I've given you a bit of a cook's tour about where things are going, but for most patients, open heart surgery is still the best option. It's a very good option, but in certain scenarios, there may be newer procedures. As technology improves, we're getting better at it as well. So we're moving to simpler approaches, which are safer. They seem to be very durable and are much less invasive. And over the next 10 years, we expect that these are likely to become much more standard procedures. And so I think this is a really good news story, because as our patients have different problems, we're coming up with much better ways to treat it, much less invasive ways, and hopefully we can offer these much more broadly. But they are expensive, and for the most part, we still need more data to prove exactly how safe and exactly which patients are going to tolerate it. So thank you very much for your attention. Hopefully it wasn't too confusing with all the images and so on, but please, if you need any of these things, make certain that you speak to your cardiologist, your interventional cardiologist, your family doctor, your surgeon, and be seen by the heart team, and then hopefully they can come up with the best way to treat you. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you for your attention and have a great day.
Wow, I am so amazed by how far technology has come in the last few years in our fight against heart disease, and what the future holds that Dr. Connelly has told us about. We live in incredible times. We need to remain hopeful for the future. I think we can all take a bit of a wellness break at this point. Let's get up, stretch, and put into action the motivation we got from our previous speakers. Please welcome back our wellness coach, Cindy Catton.
Thanks for joining me. We're going to do some strength training today. If you have some water bottles, soup cans, pick those up now so that you can join me. I have some light free weights here today with me, and I'm going to start with some bicep curls. Make sure you're sitting nice and tall. You can be on the couch or on the kitchen chair, wherever you're most comfortable. Take those arms out nice and long beside you and reach those hands all the way up to the shoulders, nice and slow and controlled. You guys are looking great at home. Thanks for joining me. Keep going, nice and controlled. Make sure you've got your core abdominal muscles locked in nice and tight so you can sit up nice and tall. Keep going with those bicep curls. Looking good, everyone. Keep going with me. You got it. We're going to move into the next exercise. If you need to let the weights go, or you just want to do the exercise without any weights, that's okay too. Nice and tall through the core, and change the position of the weights. We're working through the shoulders a little bit. Lift up to the side and back down again, keeping the elbows nice and close to the ribs, and then lift up to the side again. If you're not feeling comfortable with this exercise, you can change the range of motion, so don't go as far. or you can loosen your hands so you're not using any weights. Great, thanks for joining me. Keep going. Lift those elbows up nice and high and stay nice and tall through the center so that your core is locked in. Nice work, everyone. Okay, we're gonna switch again. Relax the shoulders. Give me a little shoulder roll here so we're relaxing through the upper body, keeping the core nice and strong. Let's work through the lower body now. Lift the heels off the ground and then lift the toes. So you've got a little bit of work through the center of the body. The core is nice and strong and we're working through the lower calf muscles. You guys are looking great. Lift the heels, lift the toes. We want to make sure that we're working through the lower legs, nice and strong. Great work, everyone. Okay, that was a nice little break, but we've got to get back into some more exercises with the weights. Here we go. We're lifting these weights up to the ears this time and overhead pressing. Reach through nice and long and bring those weights back down to the ears. Overhead press. We're working the shoulders again and come on back down to the ears. Extend all the way up and lower back down. Again, if you're not comfortable with this exercise or you don't have quite as much range of motion, that's okay. Movement is what we're looking for. Keep the abdominals nice and strong and elevate overhead. Good work, everyone. Let's go. One more. Nice and strong. Lift up and all the way back down, nice and controlled, keeping the abdominals nice and strong again. Okay, we've got to get that lower body moving. Lift up those knees a little bit. We're going to work through the hip flexors a little bit, work through the hips, and just increasing the cardiovascular movement here. Everyone's looking great. I know you can lift your feet off the ground. If this isn't comfortable, you can go back to those heel lifts or those toe lifts, whatever you prefer. Just move that body a little bit and stay nice and strong with me while we're exercising. Good. Lift up the knees, nice and strong. Lift up. We've worked some of the body parts. We're gonna do some stretching now. If you need to let your weights go, you can drop those on the floor, beside you on the table, whatever you're most comfortable with. Take one leg out, nice and straight. We're gonna stretch through the hamstrings and the calf, the muscles in the back of the legs. So pull the toes up and just lean your body forward just a little bit. You should feel the stretch through the back of the leg and through the hamstring. You're really working. I know you are. Good work, everyone. Bring that foot back to the center, step the other foot forward. Pull the toes up towards you so you feel a little extra stretch through the back of the leg, calf muscles and hamstrings. Leaning forward, but keeping your body nice and tall so that you feel you're strong through the abdominals. Great work. How's that feeling? Sometimes it's pretty tight in the hamstrings. Good job. Back to center. Now I need a big shoulder roll. We want to work through some stretches through that upper body. Good. Nice big shoulder roll. Keep the ears over the shoulders so our posture is nice and strong, but I want you to start to round out the back a little bit. Interlace your fingers if you feel comfortable. We're stretching through the back muscles. How's everyone doing at home? Great. How's that feel? A little stretch through the upper shoulders and back, and then release. Good work. Give me that shoulder roll again so you're nice and strong. Okay, we're almost finished. Take that arm across the front. This is stretching through the shoulders. We did a little bit of work through the shoulders with those side raises and overhead presses. We want to make sure we stretch those muscles. Good work, and relax back down. Let's try the other side. Pull that arm in and across, feeling the stretch through the shoulder. Good work, and release back down. Good, relax again. We did some bicep curls. We're going to stretch out through the arm. Straighten out the arm, pull down the fingers just gently. We want to feel a little stretch through the wrist in through the front of the arm. You guys are looking good. Let's try the other side. Take the arm out nice and long, pull down the fingers just gently so you're feeling comfortable there. Good work, everyone. Nice big shoulder roll again. Inhale and exhale, nice and strong, and give me one big lift through the arms. Inhale and exhale again. And thanks for joining me for the Strength and Stretch.
Thank you, everyone, for staying with me and giving me the opportunity to do my part of this presentation. It's my job to put it together so we can all move forward. Ready, set, let's go. So why are we spending so much time this morning talking about all of the things that we need to do to reduce heart disease? It's a lot of work that we've talked about today. We need to change our diet, we need to exercise more, we need to manage stress, quit smoking. So many changes that we've talked about. Why? Why do all of that? A lot of work. Well, the statistics speak to themselves. Every 7 minutes, a Canadian will die of heart disease or stroke. During the remainder of my few minutes with you, 4 to 5 Canadians will have died from a disease that is preventable and treatable. That's a tragedy that we need to prevent and reverse the statistic. But you know what? We have come an enormous distance in the last number of years. We have lived longer and healthier lives for decades. But for the first time in over 200 years, in fact, North Americans in the last 3-4 years are living not as long as they did before. Now, some of that is clearly due to the COVID-19 virus itself. We lost a number of Canadians to this virus. But not everything is due to the virus. We have changed our ways during this time. We've become more sedentary, we've gained weight as we've talked about, and other diseases have continued to progress in the background. Heart disease has progressed, strokes have increased, and as a result, for the first time in decades, life expectancy in North America has dropped. That statistic needs to be reversed. We need to regroup our efforts, do what we can to live healthier lives. It's up to us to do the things that we need to do. So today's topic is not about all the doom and gloom of what's happened over the last few years. It's really to talk about the fact that we should not lose heart. We need to stay hopeful. Huge progress has been made in the advancement of heart disease prevention and treatment. Those strategies need to be implemented to protect your heart health. You've been given a number of tools today to do so. It's recognizing the warning signs that you're at risk so you can survive a catastrophic event if it should occur, God forbid. Ultimately, it's about getting back on the road to heart health, and we can do that together. So let's get going. Remember, this event is put on in memory of my mother-in-law, Grandma Linda, that we lost far too young to the ravages of heart disease. She was in her early 50s when she first had her heart attack. And back then, 30 years ago, the only treatments that were available to us were very invasive bypass surgery. And so she needed a triple bypass right off the bat. Then she struggled over the next few years with recurrent problems with heart failure and other complications. Ultimately, she needed another surgery. And back then, heart surgeries were big deals. The chest had to be split open. People were put on heart-lung bypass machines, very invasive, lots of tubes and wires put throughout the body to keep the person alive. Unfortunately, the second surgery was so complex and she had so weakened with time that she did not survive that surgery. A catastrophic event for me, my family, and for my wife, Michelle. And it's in her honor that we put on this event year after year. So you can imagine a few years ago when Grandma Linda's husband, our papa, was diagnosed with an aortic aneurysm. We were scared. We were really fearful of potential complications. He was already 85 at the time, and our memories of what happened to Grandma Linda haunted us all. But we knew we had to do something. Fortunately, things had changed by the time he needed surgery. Traditional aortic aneurysm surgery is a big deal. It is, in fact, one of the biggest surgeries known to man. The aorta, as many of you know, is the main blood vessel that carries the blood out of the heart to the rest of the body. And he had developed an aneurysm, an outpouching, a thinning of the wall of this blood vessel that could tear and rupture. And so we had to repair this. Historically, that would require reconstruction of all of those blood vessels, a multi-hour surgery that carried a lot of risk at any age, but particularly for someone already in their mid-80s. So we were worried that he would need such a big invasive surgery. Breakthroughs, though, had already started to develop, and we were very fortunate to be connected with an expert scientist and surgeon at St. Michael's Hospital. He has developed a breakthrough technology where through CT CAT scanning, we take an image of the patient's aorta and 3D print a graft that perfectly matches that particular patient's blood vessels. That graft is then put through the legs inside the heart without needing to cut open the chest. A much less invasive procedure. And we were very fortunate that Papa was one of the first Canadians to be offered this opportunity for repair. So this is a breakthrough technology. We can now repair some of these aneurysms using a catheter inserted in the leg. It's passed up through the aorta to where the outpouching and thinned walls are of the aorta. A balloon is inflated that has a graft attached to it. It then implants inside the blood vessel walls and reinforces the walls. So now it is no longer thin and at much less risk of complications. It does not require the chest to be split open. We were amazed by this technology and humbled that it was there, ready for Papa when he needed it. This is Papa 2 hours after the procedure, already awake, already starting to talk, and the next morning with my wife Michelle, chipper as ever, having breakfast, and the life of the family. We were so humbled and honored that he was given the opportunity to have one of these procedures as one of the first Canadians. And it really speaks to how far we've come in the few decades since Grandma Linda's heart disease. We have made enormous progress, but not everybody needs such invasive procedures. Other people have diseases that can be controlled with medications. One of the more common cardiac conditions is called heart failure, a condition where the heart doesn't pump efficiently. As a result, blood backs up into the lungs, people feel short of breath. It backs up into the feet, they start to swell up. It's very uncomfortable, very debilitating. So, have advances been made in the treatment and management of heart failure? As a heart failure cardiologist, I have to say I am so excited by how much we've learned in the last few years. We've learned how to control and potentially sometimes reverse this disease. We've learned that there are 4 pillars of heart failure management that are essential. 4 groups of medications that dramatically change outcomes in patients with heart failure. Beta blockers, angiotensin receptor neprilysin inhibitors, SGLT2 inhibitors, and aldosterone antagonists. These 4 medications taken together have an enormous benefit for heart failure patients. But medications don't work on their own. As we've talked so many times this morning, it is about personal empowerment. And what the studies show and work we have done at the Cambridge Cardiac Care Centre shows that patients that exercise, that go through cardiac rehabilitation, that follow an appropriate diet, when combined with these medications, have dramatic benefits in the control and management of heart failure. And the statistics and the studies prove that. If patients are on no treatment for heart failure, 1 in 3 will have died within 2 years from heart failure. If all 4 classes of drugs are used, that risk of dying is dropped to less than 10%, a huge achievement. And we're developing better and better therapies and technologies. The science of cardiovascular medicine continues to progress at a breakneck pace. How about atrial fibrillation? Another common condition. Are there advances in atrial fibrillation management you should know about? Again, really important you understand this condition if you have it. One of the big concerns when someone develops atrial fibrillation is the risk of stroke. Atrial fibrillation is a condition where the heart becomes too fast and irregular. When it beats irregularly, there are parts of the heart that aren't beating at all. They're fibrillating or just shaking. And as a result, blood can clot in those segments, and that clot can break off, fly off to the brain, and cause brain damage and stroke. And studies show that patients with atrial fibrillation are at a 5-fold greater risk of stroke than the general population. Fortunately, very effective medications called NOACs, blood thinners that prevent blood clots from forming in the heart, have been developed. And they dramatically reduce the risk of strokes in patients with atrial fibrillation. Breakthrough therapies. But not everybody can take a blood thinner. Some people have bleeding complications, they continue to bleed, and as a result can't be on blood thinners or have other disease states that preclude the use of blood thinners. In the past, we could do nothing about those patients. We couldn't prevent strokes in those patients. But what we've actually learned over the last few years is that 90% of blood clots in atrial fibrillation come from one part of the heart, called the left atrial appendage, a little outpouching on the left side of the heart. That outpouching is where blood clots, The clot can then break off and fly off and cause the stroke. So we've now developed technologies to essentially put an umbrella over that little outpouching, sealing it off so blood can't fly off from that clot and can't cause a stroke. And within a few weeks, that area seals up once the umbrella is put in, and then there is no possibility for the blood clot to disseminate to the rest of the body. So studies show these umbrella devices to seal off the left atrial appendage are incredibly effective at preventing strokes in patients that can't take blood thinners. So we now have very effective strategies for people who can take blood thinners to prevent strokes, and those that can't, we have devices to help prevent strokes for them as well. In fact, at the Cambridge Cardiac Care Centre, we're about to start a study looking at combining those two strategies, having patients on blood thinners and putting an umbrella device in place to prevent strokes. Will that reduce stroke rates even further? Don't know yet. Data will be coming. Stay tuned. How about patients that don't have heart disease yet but are at risk? They've been told that you might develop heart disease in the future. Well, one group of individuals that are at a high risk for heart disease are diabetics. If you've developed diabetes, your family member has recently been diagnosed, you might have been told that you're at risk for heart disease. What do you need to know? Are there advances there that you will help to prevent heart disease in your case? Well, the most important thing to remember first off is that yes, heart disease does put you at a significant risk for heart attacks. In fact, studies show that within 7 years of being a diabetic, you're at the same risk of a heart attack as somebody who's already had a heart attack. That's right, you heard me. If you've been a diabetic for 7 years, you're at the same risk of a heart attack as someone else who was just sent home after a heart attack. Diabetes is serious business. We need to take it seriously. We need to put the effort in to prevent heart disease, heart attacks, and strokes in diabetics. And unfortunately, there's an epidemic of diabetes in our population as we've all gained weight and become more sedentary over the last few years. So diabetes affects the heart very quickly. In fact, studies show that within 5 years of the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, almost 70% of individuals will develop some form of cardiac dysfunction. This is a very serious condition. It's not just a touch of sugar. We need to take it seriously. We need to follow the right diet, we need to exercise, and fortunately, huge innovations have come in place for management of diabetes with new medications. One group of medications that's shown dramatic benefits for type 2 diabetes are called SGLT2 inhibitors, or what some people call Flozins. These drugs substantially reduce the risk for heart failure and kidney failure, two of the leading complications in diabetes. Another group of medications called GLP-1 receptor agonists also do all the right things. They lower sugar, but they also help with weight loss, and importantly, they reduce the risk of heart attacks, strokes, the risk of dying, kidney failure, all of the things that we need to do to help protect diabetics from complications for their heart. These are drugs that are now termed game changers for diabetes control and heart disease prevention. And in fact, we're now studying these drugs in non-diabetics and showing some of these drugs have significant benefits. Even people without diabetes can benefit from being on these drugs. So they are revolutionary drugs that will change the management of diabetes going forward. If you are a diabetic, make sure you're doing the right things. You're working on your diet, you're exercising, working on stress management, but seeking out information. Ask your healthcare provider, are you on the right drugs? Maybe you've been on the same type of diabetic drugs for 10, 15 years. A lot's changed over the last few years. You need to be on modern drugs that provide heart protection. These therapies are game changers. How about if you have a family history of heart disease? As far as you know, you don't have any conditions, but it runs in your family. Multiple family members have had heart attacks or strokes. Anything you can do? Is it a fait accompli? I know heart disease runs in my family. Am I destined to that same fate, or is there something I can do about that? Well, the most important thing to know about heart attacks and strokes is that ultimately blockages are about cholesterol. This is a picture of an unfortunate gentleman that died of a heart attack. And at autopsy, we looked at his blood vessels and saw that the wall of the blood vessels were full of this gooey, yellow, soft, liquidy stuff, cholesterol, that had built up inside the walls, thinned the walls of the blood vessel. Ultimately, the blood vessel tore open and ruptured and triggered the heart attack that led to the death of this gentleman. That's what we need to prevent. So ultimately, cholesterol buildup inside the walls is what causes heart attacks and strokes in the vast majority of individuals. And studies show categorically reducing cholesterol lowers heart attacks. Wherever you start, lowering your cholesterol by 50% reduces your risk of a heart attack dramatically. And there is no bottom to cholesterol. The lower we get the cholesterol, the lower the risk. Fortunately, for a number of years now, we've had very effective drugs to help us lower cholesterol beyond diet and exercise. Statins are the mainstay of therapy for cholesterol reduction and heart attack prevention. We have multiple statins available to us now. Some people may not tolerate one statin, and so if you're having problems with your current statin, speak to your healthcare provider. There may be an alternate they can try. Statins reduce cholesterol anywhere between 20 to 60%, and in some individuals can both shut down the process of plaque formation and sometimes even reverse plaque formation. But not in everybody. Some individuals, statins are just not enough. They may have a genetic predisposition. There's a condition called heterozygous familial hyperlipidemia, a condition where the body produces too much cholesterol and doesn't burn it efficiently as fuel. So the cholesterol starts to build up inside the walls of the blood vessels, ultimately leading to narrowing and plaque buildup that can trigger heart attacks or strokes. And in these individuals with genetic abnormalities where cholesterol just runs too high because their body's producing too much of it, even statins sometimes are not enough. In the past, again, we didn't have any therapies for that. Science, though, has progressed enormously in the last few years. We've recognized that this abnormality is often due to a protein called PCSK9. PCSK9 is a naturally occurring protein that all of us make. Some people make too much of it. This protein interferes with the body's natural ability to metabolize cholesterol. The body produces cholesterol, it uses it up for energy stores, but what's left should go back to the liver, and the liver should take it up and burn it for fuel. People who make too much PCSK9, that protein interferes with the liver's ability to break down cholesterol. And what we've learned now, though, is we have developed therapies that can inhibit that protein. By blocking that PCSK9 protein, taking it out of circulation, we allow the liver to do its job and clear the cholesterol from the body. And when combined with statins, these drugs further lower cholesterol 50 to 60% beyond what the statin can do. And even in people who have genetic abnormalities of cholesterol, this can dramatically lower cholesterol to levels that potentially can even start to reverse heart disease. We're in an era no longer of control, but potentially of reversal of disease. That's an incredible accomplishment of science. But some individuals end up with heart attacks even when their LDL cholesterol is very low. How could that be? Didn't I just tell you that heart attacks were due to plaque buildup with cholesterol fat inside the walls? Well, in these individuals, the answer may lie in a protein called lipoprotein A. We've just started to learn about this protein, and this test is now readily available in Ontario and covered by OHIP. So lipoprotein A is a naturally circulating protein. And again, some people make too much of it. I'm one of those people. I inherited this gene through my family, and my body produces too much lipoprotein A. And lipoprotein A has all sorts of bad effects. Two big bad effects that it does is that it's pro-atherogenic. What that means is that it directly damages blood vessels and leads to plaque buildup inside the walls of those blood vessels. It's also prothrombotic. What that means is that it causes blood to clot. So one, it causes the plaque to build up, and two, it causes the blood to clot on that plaque, and that's a serious complication. That's what triggers heart attacks. And studies show that 1 in 14 heart attacks and 1 in 7 cases of heart valve conditions called aortic stenosis may be due to lipoprotein A abnormalities. This is one of the most commonly inherited genetic abnormalities. 1 in 5 Canadians carry the gene for producing too much lipoprotein A. And this is very much a genetic disorder. Diet, exercise, all of the things that we've talked about this morning do not lower lipoprotein A. Even the traditional medications like statins do not lower lipoprotein A. In fact, currently there is no treatment available for lipoprotein A. So why are we talking about it? Why get something tested if you can't do anything about it? Well, we know that if you have high levels of lipoprotein A, you're at a much higher risk of heart attacks and strokes. So what you should do is do everything else right. Make sure you get all of the rest of your cholesterol very well controlled. Control your blood pressure well. Control your diabetes, exercise, diet, all of the things that we've talked about. Do everything else right so that nothing else is contributing to the harm that lipoprotein A may be doing. But remain hopeful. There's incredible science and progress on managing lipoprotein A. Exciting new research is now looking at silencing the gene that causes lipoprotein A to go up. That's right. We now have the technology to literally turn off genes that cause bad effects in our body. Incredible breakthrough science. We're very fortunate at the Cambridge Cardiac Care Centre that we're doing 2 trials looking at silencing this gene to both reduce the development of plaque and heart attacks, as well as reduce the development of aortic stenosis. And the studies would suggest that this gene silencing technology could lower lipoprotein A by almost 80%. And if we can do that effectively, we may be able to prevent heart attacks and strokes in these individuals that have inherited this genetic abnormality, like I have. Stay tuned. Exciting new research is on the way. But are all of the breakthroughs in heart disease prevention about medications and procedures? Aren't there any things that you can do yourself, lifestyle changes that you could make? Well, in fact, we've done a lot of research on this as well. The Cambridge Cardiac Care Centre, as you know, is the regional cardiac rehab program, and we extensively study interventions and lifestyle, diet and exercise that may help you to control your heart disease. We did a study a few years back looking at the impact of a diet rich in fruits, vegetables, omega-3 foods, and showed that this type of diet, a variant of the DASH diet, could significantly control blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood sugar, all of the things that lead to the development of heart disease. So yes, you can make dietary changes and have a significant impact beyond just what medications can do. Exercise as well has an enormous impact on heart health, as we've talked about so many times this morning. Unfortunately, over the last few years, we've all become more sedentary. The sitting time has increased significantly, and sedentarism has all sorts of harm for all of body parts, but particularly the heart. Studies show that people who sit too long are at a much greater risk for heart attacks and strokes. And we need to be motivated to start exercising once again. So what are the benefits of exercise? Well, they're enormous. Exercise reduces the chances of heart attacks and strokes. It reduces stress levels and improves depression, may help with your mood. In fact, it is one of the most effective strategies that an individual struggling with a mood disorder can do themselves to lift their mood. It reduces the risk of obesity and weight gain, reduces high blood pressure, reduces the risk of diabetes, strengthens the immune system, and on and on and on. Every body part benefits from physical activity. So reincorporating physical activity into your daily life is an essential thing you can do to stay heart healthy. It's various types of exercises. Exercise has been shown significantly to reduce the risk of a heart attack or stroke, and people who exercise live longer, live healthier. And there are various exercises you can do. You can incorporate aerobic exercises, strength training, and we did a study recently showing that adding in yoga on top of traditional exercises of strength training and aerobic exercises can further potentially reduce the risk of heart attacks or strokes and control cardiovascular risk. So it is in your power to do so. And studies show that 90% of the risk of a heart attack or stroke is modifiable. That's right, 90% you can control through changes by controlling your blood pressure, controlling diabetes, controlling cholesterol, quitting smoking, managing your weight, and exercising adequately. You can cut the risk of a heart attack or stroke by 90%. That's an unbelievable number. It motivates me every morning to keep working at this. We can do this together. So remember, you can control your risk factors. You can control things that can propagate heart disease. By controlling them, you can reduce the risk of developing diabetes, controlling your blood pressure, and controlling your cholesterol. That can reduce plaque formation and lead to heart attacks or strokes. But despite our efforts of prevention, sometimes people will still have a heart attack or stroke, perhaps due to genetics or other mechanisms. If you think you're having a heart attack or stroke, the most important thing to remember is call 911, seek emergency care if it's something unexpected and you think it might be your heart. So what are the warning signs to be aware of for a heart attack? Heart attacks sometimes can present with chest pain, discomfort, pressure. Some people call it a squeezing sensation in their chest. Unexpected, perhaps this is a heart. Some people don't get pain in the chest though. They get pain in their jaw, their neck, their arms, their back. Again, unexpected, new, not sure what it is, perhaps it's your heart. Some people don't get any pain or discomfort at all. They just feel short of breath. Particularly diabetics or women don't necessarily manifest chest pain as a manifestation of a heart attack. They just get acutely short of breath. You didn't do anything physical. You were just sitting quietly. Suddenly you're very short of breath. Why is that? Not sure. Perhaps it's your heart. You might need to seek emergency care. You break out in a cold sweat unexpectedly. Again, you're not in a hot environment. You're not having anything else triggering this type of sweating. Not sure what it is? Don't take a risk. Some people just feel profoundly fatigued with the onset of a heart attack, particularly women. They may not get pains in their chest, they may not even get short of breath, but they weren't doing anything physical, and all of a sudden they're profoundly fatigued. Not sure what it is? Don't take a risk. Finally, some people just get very nauseous and start to throw up unexpectedly. They didn't eat anything funny, no one else is sick in the family, and suddenly you're throwing up. Not sure what it is? Don't take a risk. These are all potential warning signs for a heart attack. If you're not sure, you're worried it could be your heart, don't take a risk. Call 911. Paramedics will arrive on scene. They'll assess you. If it's not your heart, they'll tell you what to do next. If it is your heart, they may be able to start treatment in your home to help prevent a heart attack or stroke. Every minute counts. We don't want you losing heart muscle or brain tissue from a heart attack or stroke. If you think it's your heart, don't take a risk, seek out help. That's why the EMS system exists. So prevention ultimately begins with you. It's about recognizing that you're at risk and making changes one step at a time. So remember, these are long-term changes, not short-term fixes. We want to change unhealthy habits to healthy habits so we can propagate for the rest of our life. Heart disease prevention is a long-term game. There is no quick fix. By leading a healthy life, we know that we can prevent both heart disease as well as other chronic conditions. That incorporates both healthy diets as well as incorporating exercise. Start off slow, 10, 15 minutes, increase it gradually with a goal to get to about 30 to 45 minutes of physical activity 5 days a week. A combination of both aerobic exercise as well as light strength training is important for the heart. And by incorporating these small steps, we can all get there. We have to keep going. New lifestyle changes are things that we need to propagate for the rest of our life. It's not a quick fix, as I've said. Sometimes it can be difficult to stay motivated. So set realistic goals. Don't shoot for the moon right off the bat. You can get there. It will take time. Sometimes it helps to buddy up. I know that for myself, when I'm exercising alone, sometimes I get a little bored or lose my motivation. So I exercise with my wife. And so when I'm losing my motivation, she'll cheer me up, she'll get me going. And at other times when she's less motivated to exercise, me exercising with her gets her going. Buddying up with a family, a friend, or even a pet, going for a walk with your dog will help you keep motivated. But don't worry about slip-ups. All of us will potentially slip up. There are days when I come home from call when I'm just exhausted and I just can't get to exercise that day. I can't beat myself up about that. I need to wait till the next day and get back up, start exercising again, and not beat myself up that I missed a day of exercise. So there will be slip-ups, but keep going. And remember to reward your successes. If you've set a goal for yourself that at 6 months you're going to be walking 30 minutes every day and you get there, reward yourself for that. Huge achievement. Not necessarily by going out to a fatty meal, perhaps go to a movie, pat yourself on the back. You achieved it. Set your next goal. It's about taking the baby steps to get to that final goal of heart health. And we can do this together. So, ready, set, let's go.
They say what you don't know won't hurt you. Well, it almost killed me.
When I went home from the hospital, they discharged me. 2.5 hours later, I came back in an ambulance and had my stroke while I was pregnant.
No one saw my heart attack coming. They wouldn't listen to me until I flatlined.
I knew that this headache I had was not normal. I had tried to get help. I was sent home with the wrong diagnosis.
No mom should ever have to go through what I went through.
No woman should ever be dismissed like I was.
Enough is enough.
Thank you everyone for staying with me this morning. What an exciting morning. I've learned so much from our exceptional speakers, so much that will guide my heart health. I hope you've learned a lot today as well. As you can imagine, an event like this takes a lot of effort, and that effort is led by my wife, Michelle Pandey. For her, this is a personal journey. As I've said before, we put this event on each year in memory of our grandma Linda, Michelle's mother, that we lost to heart disease 20 years ago. That guides Michelle to know that she can do things to make our community heart healthy. Michelle is an accomplished pharmacist and researcher that leads the Cambridge Cardiac Care Centre's research team. And it's in her guidance that this event is put on each year. She's co-chaired by our chair of the Cambridge Prevent Clinic, Dr. Michael Laurie. Mike is the former chief of staff at Cambridge Memorial Hospital, and he is the former compliance officer at the College of Physicians and Surgeons. And with those backgrounds, you can imagine that he runs a tight ship. He makes sure we stay focused, that this event is about you, giving you the tools that you need to stay heart healthy. He's joined on that board of directors by Kesh Disanaki, the patient and community care representative. Kesh leads our social media outreach program to make sure that this information is relayed effectively on various social media platforms. Thank you, Kesh, for all your efforts. But obviously an event like this requires a large team, a team that comprises members from the Cambridge Cardiac Care Centre, the Cambridge Cardiac Rehab Program, but an extensive list of individuals that dedicate their time and effort to put this event on and make sure it's successful. I thank them for their personal efforts. To put on an event like this and to ensure that it is effective, that the information reaches the audience, that it gets to our community, requires media sponsors. And that includes Rogers TV, Waterloo Region Record, 96.7 Chime FM, 96.7 Country FM, and 570 News. Thank you for getting the word out to the community. An event like this is costly and it does require corporate sponsors. They are listed on this slide right now. I thank them for their efforts and for the continued sponsorship of this event. Community sponsors for this event include the Cambridge City Council, the Heart and Stroke Foundation, the Cambridge North Dumfries Ontario Health Team, Langs Farm Community Centre, the Waterloo Wellington Diabetes Program, RBC Dominion Securities, Amanda Knapp. Thank you for your sponsorship and the continued efforts at promoting heart health in our community. But this event requires a lot of staffing from our Cambridge Cardiac Care Centre, a dedicated group of individuals that make it their priority to ensure that heart health is promoted in our community. These are exceptional people, and I am so proud to work with them. Thank you for your efforts. I always remember that this event is in memory of our grandma Linda. We lost her to heart disease 20 years ago, and she guides us each day to stay focused, giving people the tool they need to stay heart healthy. Thank you, Grandma Linda. You're with us each day. Ultimately, though, this event is about you, the participants. Thank you for staying with me this morning. It's been an exceptional morning. I am so excited by what I've learned today, and I'm so looking forward to next year. That'll be our 20th year, 20 years. What an accomplishment. I am so proud that we've been able to keep this event going, and I'm so excited to be with you next year. So thank you for this morning. Thank you for learning with me this morning, and I hope to see you again in a year's time.